Chapter 275. For Duque, it was just a convenience, but for the Bara family, it had a completely different meaning. As if seeing through what Duque wanted the most, after confirming their close alliance, Lady Janice threw out her ultimate trump card. It's a Lugia's honor to study the mysteries of magic with you, Duque. I'll write a letter now. Please pass it to Lugia when you go to the Dalajan. Duque was curious. Madam, you know that I'm going to the Dalajan? Lady Janice showed a proud expression. I heard that you used ice spells to kill more than a dozen powerful orc assassins in the command center and saved 4 kings? Duque tilted his head. That's right. I only know that if it was my senior brother Antonidas, even when he was still a sky mage, he would not have let the last assassin break through his ice domain. Even if he was the chief of a tribe. Why do you say that? Although he had guessed Janice's intentions, Duque still asked. Because at that time, he had a top-level ice circuit model more than you did. Lady Janice smiled like a flower, and her posture as she took a sip of black tea was extremely elegant. Duque seemed to see an equally elegant foxtail wagging behind her. This was where Janice was smart. From the perspective of forming an alliance or deepening friendship, the conditions she gave Duque before could not be considered generous or costly. She and the Bara family certainly hoped to have Duque as external aid, but at this time, it seemed that the Bara family did not necessarily need Duque's support. To some extent, this was also a test. If Duque refused, then naturally, the top-level ice circuit model would not have anything to do with Duque. If Duque agreed like this, it would be a pleasant surprise. Janice did not add this bargaining chip when she made the request, because she did not want this to become a pure transaction. In exchange for the Bara family's gift, he wouldn't help the Bara family at a critical moment. After figuring this out, Duque didn't have any ill feelings towards Janice. This kind of, if you respect me, I'll respect you tenfold, method. Duque didn't hate it. Moreover, Lady Janice was smart enough to figure out what he wanted. She was indeed quite intelligent. I told senior brother Antonidas long ago that I wanted him to pass the ice circuit to Lugia. As half of Lugia's master, I think you, Duque, should help Lugia with her research. Janice summoned her servant and wrote a letter in her own handwriting, handing it to Duque. Thank you so much, madam. Just like that, Duque brought Janice's handwritten letter to the Dalajan. It was different from the last time he came in the middle of the night. This time, although Duque took advantage of this rare free time to pay a visit of a more personal nature, Duque's status was completely different now. Previously, Duque's magic had not been proven to the 5 northern countries. Now, Duque was a big shot who had truly secured the position of the deputy commander of the alliance. Therefore, the person who led the team to receive Duque was Prince Kale, that's one of the 6-member council members who remained in the Dalajan. Welcome, Commander Marcus. At this time, Kale, that was still the role model of the High Elf. He was gentle and elegant, and he gave off a feeling of a spring breeze to anyone he met. Moreover, he deliberately hid the word deputy to make him appear more mature. Everyone liked to be flattered. Kale, that's name, which seemed to have slipped out, was actually a slightly exaggerated compliment. Hee, when you say that, I almost think that Commander Lothar is here, Duque replied without a trace. There's no need to be humble. Everyone knows your contributions to the alliance. Seeing that Duque was not snubbed, Kale, that did not deliberately sow discord between Duque and Lothar. He changed the topic and said, actually, many mages in the Dalajan are fascinated by your spellcasting skills. If you have time to come to the Dalajan to teach or hold seminars, I'm sure many mages will join the royal mages in Stormwind because of your reputation. It's not good for me to poach mages in the Dalajan like this, right? Duque was slightly tempted. In the Dalajan, all mages are equal and free. Mystics pay attention to fair trade. In order to explore a more profound world of magic, so what if I give up a moment of freedom? Just as everyone can freely choose whether to join the Dalajan's direct mages, the Dalajan will not mind free mages joining Stormwind or becoming your followers, Your Excellency. How about it? Do you want to consider it? Kale, that's flattery at the beginning had gone too far. Then this time, Kale, That's proposal could be said to be a tailor-made and wonderful proposal. It immediately touched Duque's heart. Abducting mages for free. He did not need to cultivate them himself. He could just take away a semi-finished product and train them himself for a year and a half. When the time came, even if they were not flashy enough, they could still be scary. Duque was really tempted. This time, Duque was sincerely grateful to Kale. Sorry Kale? Thank you very much. I think I'll find some time. Before that, I want to see Antonidas first. Please follow me. That's finally confirmed that he had redeemed the little bit of unhappiness at the beginning and had successfully gained Duque's favor. It was reasonable to say that as the prince of the High Elves, Kale, could completely ignore Duque on the surface. But one should not forget why Kale, had come to the Dalagen to study and then stayed for so many years. He could not return to Kuel Salis even though he was about to go moldy. The story behind this was the power struggle between his father, the Sun King, and the Silver Moon Council. Having seen the customs of the two worlds, Kale, had long become extremely mature. In particular, there was no harm in having a good relationship with Duque, the powerful deputy commander of the Alliance. Moreover, he and Duque also had a strange sense of closeness. It was a kind of closeness that seemed to come from the same source. Walking on the streets of the Dalagen, Duque felt very strange. This was a Dalagen that had not been destroyed. Although it was not as wonderful as the Dalagen that floated in the air in the future and was known as the City in the Sky. Now, this Dalagen was even bigger and more historical. This wonderful city located south of Lake Lordamere was a combination of wisdom, power, grandeur, beauty, art, and mystery. It was the brightest pearl of the entire continent and even the entire world. Once, almost all the human mages in the world studied the magic they learned from the High Elves here. And the mysterious and elegant white towers all over the city showed the wisdom, ambition, status, and power of the mages. If Duque had not inherited Karazhan, perhaps Duque would have considered building a mage tower here. As Kale, led the way, he introduced everything here to Duque. At this moment, a very beautiful blonde girl came in front of Duque. Hello, Your Excellency Sky Mage Duke Marcus. I am Jaina Proudmoore. Chapter 276. In the world of Azeroth, there were two heroines that no one could avoid. The Alliance's Jaina. The Horde's Sylvanas. In the world's crisis after crisis, the two of them may not have played the most important role, but in every event, they were indispensable. Duque had mixed feelings about Jaina. Perhaps in the future, Jaina would still walk on the path that seemed to be destined to be difficult. She would watch her rumored boyfriends die one by one, watch the entire northern continent be destroyed by the Scourge army and forced to move west to the Kalandor continent. In order to deal with a greater threat, to ensure peace with the Horde, she would be forced to commit patricide. She would continue to go astray in every attack. In the end, Theramore, which she had managed for half her life, was flattened by an Azeroth nuclear bomb. Everyone who trusted and supported her was killed, and her hair turned white overnight. She became the evil Jaina who did everything for the Black Horde and didn't care about the current situation. If that was the case, Jaina would undoubtedly have a serious conflict with Duque, who was a supremacist of the Alliance. But at this moment, Jaina was still a 12-year-old lowly. She had a delicate face that seemed to be carved by God. She had a small chin, clear blue eyes, soft blonde hair that just passed her shoulders, and a curvaceous body that had yet to fully develop. She was a classic beauty that was off the charts. Sai, 12 years old. Before Duque's transmigration, this was the age where he would have to be punished. Perhaps she already had a lot of thoughts of love and peace in her heart, but it was only at the level of a young girl's fantasy. Perhaps she would still become the Holy Mother in the future, but at this moment, she was still a 12-year-old girl. Loli had three good things. No. Actually, with Duque's current status in the Jianghu, he was not inferior to Jaina at all. In other words, if Duque wanted to, he could totally adopt Jaina, change her name to Ailey, and teach her what it meant to be an Anababa. Cuff. You must be joking. Duque was not such a person. He had always believed in his own integrity. Look, if necessary, he could loudly declare 3 times without hesitation. I'm not a lolicon. I'm not a lolicon. I'm a lolicon. There seems to be something wrong with the third time. Forget it, in life, there are as many troubles as the stars in the sky. Don't mind these small details. That's could not help but smile when he saw that Duque was stunned after seeing Jaina. He suddenly remembered that the all-powerful deputy commander of the Alliance who had killed more than 200,000 orcs twice was actually just a 15-year-old boy. Miss Jaina is indeed the masterpiece of the gods. She is one of the two most beautiful girls in Dalaran. Jaina's face immediately turned red when she heard Kale, who was handsome and didn't show any signs of being corrupted at all. Kale's, that is. Kale, as Kale, was. Looking at her beautiful face, Duke suddenly understood why Arthas and Kale, were infatuated with Jaina. Duke smiled and nodded slightly. Praise your beauty, Miss Proudmoore. Although I would like to use magic to show my respect to you, this is Dalaran. I'd better not embarrass myself in front of everyone. Jaina was a little disappointed after hearing Duque's words. Everyone knew about Duque's impressive achievements, but Duque was not famous for his status and achievements. Instead, he was famous for his gorgeous magic tricks to please beautiful women. In Lordaeron, Duke used a beautiful rose of ice and fire to praise Princess Kalia Menethil of Lordaeron. In Southshore, Duque had used an illusory ice crystal rainbow divine song, Ode to Joy, to promote Aurelia Windrunner's beauty to the point that almost everyone in the Alliance knew. Men worshipped heroes' invincible and unparalleled achievements. Women, on the other hand, loved heroes' gorgeous tricks. Duque did not know that there was a widely acknowledged saying among the upper-class ladies. Only those who had been praised by Duque with the most dazzling magic were truly stunning beauties. Firstly, she was quite confident in her beauty. Secondly, Jaina wanted to see what kind of hero this man, who had been repeatedly recruited by her father and almost became Kurtira's horse, was. Now that Duque had refused to help, Jaina's disappointment could be imagined. Unexpectedly, Kai Z started to make a fuss. Duque, that's not very kind of you, is it? I also know that Her Highness Kalia and Lady Aurelia are rare beauties in the world. Could it be that our Dalaran Princess Jaina is not as beautiful as them? Kale, put his hands on his hips, looking as if he was going to stand up for his Dalaran. This made it difficult for Duque to step down. Duque smiled bitterly. In the ordinary areas of the Dalaran, isn't it not allowed to cast spells casually? Kill, gently stroked his shoulder. I guarantee it with my identity. Damn it, I almost forgot that Kai Z is a member of the Kirin Tor 6-member council. Jaina did not speak, but she stared at Duque with her starry eyes full of anticipation. This was like chasing an old sow up a tree and then playing dumb pig jumping. Duque hated being forced, so he had an unspeakable evil purpose. Duque raised his hand. All right, for Lady Jaina's beauty. Under Jaina's expectant gaze, Kale, and the other curious onlookers, and under the gaze of Duque's guard, Gavin Rad, and his maid, Vanessa, Duque made his move. The immature ice circuit circulated, but with the help of the system, Duque created the most perfect fantasy effect. A huge ice crystal box appeared around Jaina. To be precise, it was this beautiful, almost transparent ice crystal box that contained Jaina. A box made of ice. Many Dalaran Morning Star mages could do it. What they couldn't do was obviously the incomparably intricate composition of the sound tube, soundboard, gears, springs, dampers, and other components inside. Although Kale, immediately sensed that the composition of this big box was incomparably complicated. As a magical genius and mechanical idiot, Kale, would never have guessed that it was a music box. 2 hands of magic gently twisted the springs on the big box. 2 beautiful ice crystal sculptures on the box began to spin and dance, 1 male and 1 female. The simple rotation was accompanied by a dazzling stream of light. And the foreign music that sounded from the music box easily evoked Jaina's beautiful memories of the past. She even felt a little nostalgic and fell into a dreamy imagination. No one thought that Duque could actually solidify abstract music into tangible magical artwork. It was simply a miracle. The sound made Jaina intoxicated. Well, if this music score could be composed with lyrics, it would be, "Ignore me, I'm a peddler, it's only natural for me to be worn down." Chapter 277. Duque turned his head and threw Jaina to the back of his mind. There were many people and many things that could not be touched at this time. Just like Kel Thuzad. When he saw this sinister guy, Duque wanted to cover his head and smash it with a brick. Finally, he could destroy his soul so that he could not even be a lich in the future. Unfortunately, he could not. He was one of the 6 members of the Kirin Tor Parliament. If he killed him, it would be tearing apart the alliance and even starting a war with the Dalajan. Moreover, Kel Thuzad was only a second-rate character. If he really wanted to make a move, it would be towards the first-rate. For example, he could get rid of the guy next to him and get a phoenix mount or something. Well, Duque's thoughts had gone astray. In fact, Duque respectfully paid a visit to Antonidas, who was recuperating from his injuries. The old man looked very energetic. He was not even lying on the bed. Duque met Antonidas in his laboratory. If Duque had not repeatedly confirmed that Kale, that was leading the way, and that Duque, who could be resurrected, was not afraid of being shot in the back, Duque would definitely have suspected that Antonidas was a part-time dark warlock. The hall was very large and very dark. It was not because the lighting was not good, or because Antonidas had some kind of mental illness that made him like to hide in the dark and quietly enjoy the peace. It was because the air in the entire hall was filled with a large amount of dark energy. Even though Antonidas had already summoned a few bishops of the Church of the Holy Light to continuously purify the evil energy with holy light, the evil aura that came out of the hall did not stop. "Master Antonidas, is your curse still not healed?" Old Antonidas used a golden translucent cover to cover the thing and then replied to Duque, "What? Curse? That thing has long been shaved to the limit by Archbishop Fail. I was worried that His Excellency the Archbishop was too powerful and destroyed that thing, so I couldn't study it. That's why the Archbishop left a little." Duque was dumbfounded. He saw that Antonidas had used a mysterious method to separate the curse that was almost branded on his soul and place it in a mirror image of himself for magic research. "Doesn't it hurt when your soul is separated?" Duque. Soul separation was definitely 100 or 1,000 times more painful than someone using a saw to slowly cut off your hand. Duque didn't know how Antonidas had done it. The white-haired old mage stroked his beard. "There are some things that you'll get used to after doing it too many times. For the sake of research, this was nothing. Besides, aren't you also using soul separation? I've heard about your demonstration against King Eden. You didn't leave a trace of your soul in the mirror image. So how could you perform such precise operations? Your mirror image avatar was destroyed by that sword saint. You must be in pain, right?" Seeing Duque's expression as he recalled the pain, Antonidas thought that he had guessed correctly. "It hurts a little," Duque answered honestly. A perfect misunderstanding. Duque's mirror image avatar really wasn't controlled with his soul. However, being stabbed by the Fireblade clan's chief, Dal, with his triple blood blade was truly painful. The system genie didn't detect his existence at all, and the protective shield that the system genie had released for him in a fraction of a second was unable to block it. As for Duque himself, because he hadn't mastered the ice circuit, he didn't have the ice barrier that was commonly known as a refrigerator. After coming to the world of Azeroth, Duque realized that spells or skills that could give you a short period of invincibility and protect you from any damage were not easy to obtain. The invincibility of a holy knight had to be truly recognized by the holy light. Similarly, the mage's ice barrier was the same. Of course, Duque could make ordinary ice. But in the face of absolute attack power, the hardness of ice was just a joke. To achieve that temporary invincibility, it was already close to the realm of domain power. For this, a top-grade ice circuit was indispensable. Otherwise, even if he learned it, it would only be a weakened version of ice barrier that only gave 2 or 3 seconds of invincibility. How could Duque bear this? At critical times, 1 extra second was life. Oh no, that was moral integrity. Either he didn't learn it, or he learned the best. "Did you come here to see if this old man can still fight?" "Oh, it's alright, I was wrong. I shouldn't have abandoned my duties to the Alliance and secretly come here to do research. The next time that ghoul, Dan, comes, I promise I'll take action. Of course, it's also fine if it's someone of that level. Antonidas stuffed a magic beacon into Duque's palm. Activate the beacon. I'll be there in a minute. Duque was a little speechless, but after thinking about it, it made sense. As the dignified Dalajan chairman, he definitely wouldn't need him to take action against any random enemy. The fact that he was willing to come at his beck and call was already giving him a lot of face. Besides, a Breaking Dawn mage who could teleport to any place on the continent at any time really had the capital to be willful. Duque didn't have much to say. Antonidas looked at Duque, who refused to leave, and blinked. HM? Is there something? Or do you also want to study this unknown mysterious curse? Why don't you be my assistant? I'm very interested in how you use Hand of Magic. I can give you the treatment of a morning rank assistant. Duque was embarrassed. He scratched his head. Duque still took out the letter that Lady Janice wanted him to send to Antonidas. Actually, Lady Janice asked me to give you a letter. Seeing the fire seal on the letter and the unique magical security method that lingered on the envelope, Antonidas, this old man, blushed slightly. He took the envelope with both hands, opened it impatiently, and then, the old man's face collapsed. It was an expression of laughter and anger. Antonidas seemed to want to get angry, but he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he gave in. The ice circuit model, right? That little girl really knows how to extort. Alright, it's my fault. This reason barely makes sense. Alright, here you go. Antonidas waved his right index finger over his temple. Duque suddenly saw a series of mysterious, ice-blue magic runes appear on his temple. The continuous runes formed a small ribbon that wrapped around Antonidas' index and middle fingers. Antonidas then handed this rune ribbon to Duque. When Duque once again saw that familiar yet strange three-dimensional magic model enter his mind, Duque was so excited that he almost kissed Antonidas. System notification. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the Breaking Dawn Magic Circuit model, Ice Crown. This is a magic circuit model that Breaking Dawn Archmage Antonidas has continuously modified and optimized for 30 years. After comparing it with an Nastrian Sunstrider's Arcane Fire Circuit, the circuit has no flaws. The circuit model is rated as S, perfect. It can increase the ability of the ice magic circuit by 108 times or more. It is recommended to practice it immediately. Chapter 278. 108 times? It sounded exaggerated, but in fact, it was because the ice circuit that Duque had created himself was too lousy. The magic model that he had casually found in Karazhan's library was definitely something that Duque had no choice but to do. Fortunately, rebuilding the magic circuit was not as troublesome as cultivating meridians like in the wuxia novels that Duque had read before he transmigrated. Although the magic circuit was an important source of magic power for mages to cast spells, the magic circuit could be modified or even transplanted. The ice circuit was a bit like installing an air conditioner in the body. To put it simply, as long as there was a channel to continuously transport the heat away from the body, the effect of cooling could be achieved. To make it more complicated, all sorts of things were needed, such as filtering the air that was sucked into the air conditioner, mixing it with the fresh air outside, cooling it down, and then transporting it back to the place where it was needed. The same was true for the top-notch ice circuit. Compared to the ordinary ice circuit, the Crown of Ice was undoubtedly much better. First of all, the number of elemental planes that could be connected at the same time could theoretically reach up to 128, and the number of suction points that could absorb ice elements from the atmosphere was 256. The ordinary version had 3 planes and 12 suction points. Secondly, it was stability and anti-interference. The ordinary version had only one connection method, and if it was broken, it was broken. The Crown of Ice had multiple threads that were connected at different frequencies at the same time. If a few were broken, others could be added. Then there was coordination. Antonidas' advanced product had designed a magic circuit array that could mix the ice elements of various elemental planes with different output per unit of time, and finally turn them into a unified flow that would be injected into the next level of the circuit system. Finally, there was filtering. The crown of ice would automatically determine the purity of the ice elements in the circuit based on the physical condition of the owner. The more impure ice elements that were brushed down would gather over to the arcane fire circuit and fuse with the elements brushed down from the arcane fire circuit to form a new spell, Chaotic Frostfire Missile. This kind of magic attack composed of impurities could not attack stronger spellcasters, but it would have unexpected effects against some creatures with extraordinary self-healing abilities. After reading the introduction of the Crown of Ice magic circuit, Duque was indescribably happy. However, it was necessary to be wary of others. This was the Dalajan's territory, so of course, Duque would not practice the Crown of Ice here. Looks like I'll have to find a time to go back to the Karazhan. Just as Duque was about to bid farewell to Antonidas, Duque's meddlesome system elf helped him scan the contents of the letter. On it was written, "Dear senior brother, it's time to return the favor you owe me. Give the crown of frost to Duque. I hope that he can help me take care of my precious daughter, Elugia. You can't refuse. Otherwise, I'll expose the fact that you peeped on me while I was bathing 20 years ago." It was signed, "Your most beloved junior sister, Janice." Duque was really blind. He seemed to have discovered some secret about how messy the circle of rich people was. But seeing that Janice still maintained her beauty at this age, it was obvious that Janice must have been a great beauty when she was young. But 20 years ago, Antonidas would have been close to 60 years old. Alright, this guy was really an old pervert. Duque pretended not to see such gossip. Anyway, Duque said goodbye to Antonidas with a straight face. When he came out, he was surprised to find that Kale, was still waiting for him. Your Highness," Duque had wanted to say, "You're so free," but he changed his words. "I'm really ashamed that you've waited for me for so long." The High Elf Prince was as dazzling as ever. His white teeth could be used in a toothpaste advertisement, and his golden hair could be used in a shampoo advertisement. Before Duque's transmigration, he would definitely be a national-level handsome. Alright, Duque was being modest, but in reality, Duque was jealous. The smile was as amiable as ever. "I'm the one who should be ashamed. I've seen a lot of magic messages and magic images. I also think that the existence of the orcs is a nightmare for the entire world of Azeroth. Whether I'm a part of the continent or a part of Kirin Tor, I should participate in the war. Unfortunately, no one can escape from their origins. Since I can't go to the battlefield, I can only help you in this way. Because this is also helping the Alliance." Duque suddenly sighed. Kale, that was indeed a good young man. If not for the series of tragedies and conspiracies surrounding him in his later life, he would definitely be the kind of person who was a good student when he was young, one of the top 10 outstanding youths when he grew up, and an idol like him when he was older. Alright, Duque took back the idea of killing this guy and making him drop a phoenix or something. For now, thank you for your help, Your Highness. If possible, I hope you can call me Kale, and I also hope to be able to call you Duque. Duque, is there anything else you want to do? Could you help me find Miss Elucia Barov? She seems to still be in class. I can get someone to inform her. However, I know a good place to drink tea and chat while waiting for Miss Barov. Good idea. What Kale, that said was indeed a good place. Duque didn't know how to describe this place. Generally speaking, this hotel, called the Magic Hotel, had functions of dining, entertainment, and gatherings. This hotel next to the Dalajan Central Square was more like an elegant salon. Sitting in a private room on the second floor of the hotel, looking at the same purple brick pattern under his feet, and then looking at the purple houses in the distance, it really had a different flavor. This was the Dalajan city before it was destroyed. This Dalajan city could be said to be of the same architectural style as the Sky City that floated in the sky in the future. Most of them were purple torch-like pillars or towers, fire-shaped or circular roofs, with torch-like golden edges and long white pillars below. It looked a bit like the Middle Eastern architectural style before Duque transmigrated. Sipping the faint red wine, he looked at the mages and magic apprentices coming and going below. Duque listened attentively. Almost everyone was talking about magic or magic-related things. There was almost no topic about the orcs. It was completely impossible to see that the dark clouds of war had enveloped the entire northern continent. Very peaceful, isn't it? That's asked. Yes. I don't feel the aura of war. In fact, it still has an impact. Because of the advent of war, in July, the entire kingdom has changed 70% of the fields that were originally used to grow magic materials to grow food. At the same time, the parliament has announced that any high-consumption or high-risk experiments are prohibited. All battle mages have cancelled their holidays and changed to be on standby 24 hours. Sigh, war is really too terrifying. If this kind of war continues for a few years, I really can't imagine what will happen to the Dalajan. Chapter 279. Hey, Duque, how long do you think this war is going to last? That's asked. Duke smiled faintly. Are you asking another friend in a casual conversation as a friend? Or are you asking the deputy commander of the alliance as an official? Kale, that smiled faintly. Friends. That's simple. It depends on how many more neutral forces the reckless beastmen will provoke. The more they provoke, the faster the beastmen will be destroyed. Oh! Don't be fooled by the fact that the alliance has united 8 kingdoms to fight against the horde. In fact, there are still many neutral forces that haven't participated in the war, Duque said. For example, the goblins in the southernmost Stranglethorn Vale, the Wildhammer dwarves in the hinterlands, or the northernmost Kuel Salus. At this point, Kale, that couldn't help but sigh. He then raised his head. What if we maintain the status quo? That depends on how long the Iron Stove Castle's bronze-bearded dwarves can last. If they are destroyed before the Alliance's counterattack, then it's very likely that this will become a long-lasting confrontation between the 2 continents of the Eastern Kingdom. It's not impossible for a war to break out for 100 years. Kale, that's expression turned ugly. What if all these forces join the war against the Horde? Duque raised a finger. Within a year, the Horde will definitely be defeated. This is the best news I've heard recently. A melodious voice came from the door of the private room. 2 beautiful women appeared at the door. The one who spoke was naturally Jaina, who had a good impression of Duque. Jaina, who had just received praise from Duque and the envy of countless female Dalajan mage apprentices, had no idea that this was Duque's bad idea. Jaina's impression of Duque was not low. Of course, it was much lower than that of a certain prince of Lordaeron. Jaina, who had changed into a blue magic robe, bowed to Duque like a lady. Lord Marcus, we meet again. Jaina was in a good mood. Her face was full of sunshine, as though the haze of war had been dispelled by her smile. The other was the person Duque was waiting for, the eldest daughter of the Barev family, Elucia Barev, who was only 15 years old. It was obvious that Elucia had inherited her mother's beauty. No, she was even more beautiful than Duchess Janice. Interestingly, Elucia's appearance was more in line with the Eastern aesthetic. Her skin was white and exquisite, sparkling and translucent like carved ivory jade. Her beautiful black hair was parted in the middle, obediently falling from her ears to her chest. On her forehead, there was a beautiful silver hair ornament, inlaid with a sparkling sapphire. She did not have any makeup applied on her delicate and pretty little face. Under her long and thin eyebrows, a pair of fan-like eyelashes were embedded with a pair of ice-blue eyes that were as enchanting as the autumn waters. Her eyebrows were curved like willow leaves, and her nose was straight and beautiful. The wings of her nose seemed to be flaring slightly. Below her elegant nose was a small cherry mouth. Although she did not wear lipstick, she looked brighter and more attractive than those who did. Her well-defined lips were rosy, like ripe cherries ready to be picked at any time. Even though she was wearing a loose mage robe, it was not difficult to see that she had the golden ratio of a figure. Her waist was slender but not too round. She was as perfect as a model. She was quite a beauty. In fact, in terms of appearance, Elucia was definitely not inferior to the beauties Duque had seen, such as Princess Kalia or Aurelia. She was even slightly better than Jaina, who had yet to fully develop her body. If there was anything that Alucia did not compare to them, it would be temperament. The impression that Princess Kalia gave Duque was that she was noble and kind. Aurelia was a mixture of the wildness of a ranger and the elegance of a high elf. Jaina was intelligent and extremely confident. As for Alucia, although the Bara family was also a high-ranking noble family, it could be seen that Alucia had also received an extremely good upbringing. However, Alucia looked more docile. As soon as she saw Duque, she almost hurriedly looked Duque up and down. Alucia gave up on looking at Duque. She lowered her eyelids and slightly lowered her head, which was also a very standard ladylike etiquette. "Greetings, Duke Marcus. I am Alucia Barov." Her timid voice made people want to bully her, or to protect her. Duque secretly sighed in his heart. With such a temperament, Alucia was destined to be a good marriage partner and a good wife for a man. However, Alucia would definitely not be a heroine like Aurelia. "Alucia, I believe your mother has already sent someone to inform you of the details?" "Duque, yes. In fact, it was my mother who personally used a magic message to tell me." Duque pondered for a moment in his heart. "That makes things easier. Right now, I am essentially just a sky wizard. It doesn't seem right for me to teach a peak earth wizard like you. You can be my assistant for now. After I pass this winter and advance to a morning star wizard, we can confirm our relationship." "All right." Duque still did not know that his words had already set off a storm in Kale, that's and Jaina's hearts. How could a morning star wizard be promoted so easily? At the level of a morning star wizard, one could already be addressed as a master. Further up, at the level of Radiant Moon, they were existences as rare as phoenix feathers and Chelan horns. Usually, wizards of this level were big shots. For example, people like Kale, that's Krasis, and Kel, Thuzad could easily become dukes or princes, regardless of their origins. There were only 2 breaking dawns in the entire world. When Duque said he wanted to advance, he did it as easily as if he was eating and drinking. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be treated as a braggart. However, he was Duque, a man who had tricked more than 200,000 orcs twice and burned half of the elven forest. When the Kirin Tor assembly had summoned Duque for a discussion, Kale, that's had a very deep impression of Duque. Duque did everything with complete confidence, as if nothing in the world could escape his predictions. It was as if a man like him rarely boasted, and there was no need for him to use such deceptive methods to lie about such matters. If Duque dared to say something like this, it would only mean that Duque was 100% confident. One had to know that Duque would only be 16 next year. A 16-year-old morning star wizard. If not for Duque's status as the Alliance's deputy commander and his glorious achievements, this alone would have made Duque the most dazzling star in the world of wizards. Chapter 280. Kale, that's also believed that he was talented, but his speed of leveling up was far slower than Duque's. The power he had today was built with the long lives of the High Elves. Kale, that's heart-rippled, and Jaina, who still had the temperament of a little girl, jumped up and down excitedly, congratulating Duque. Elusia's expression was a little complicated. She did not know how to describe the relationship between her and Duque, which seemed to be close, but in fact did not have much to do with each other. She could only congratulate Duque lightly. In the Barov family, Elusia felt suffocated. The noble Barov family was a typical aristocratic family. Her father, Arikos, had extraordinary means and abilities, and had unparalleled influence in the entire Alterac kingdom. However, he was very cold when it came to kinship. He had almost no time to care for his children. Her mother was a mage, busy with all kinds of experiments, and similarly did not have much time to care for her children. Elusia's 2 younger brothers, Wilton and Alex, were like 2 sharks in their mother's womb. At a young age, they had already begun to fight incessantly, openly and secretly, for the position of the next Barov family leader. Escaping to the Dalajan was the best solution Elusia could think of. However, she knew that she could not escape from the Barov family. Unmarried women of the nobility had always been important political bargaining chips. Perhaps only when she was married off by the family would she be able to relax a little from the family's strangle-like control. The only thing that was fortunate was that although her father did not care about her, he had never given her any shortage of funds for her expenses and magic experiments. Today, it seemed to be a little different. Illusia knew that her fate would be linked to the man in front of her for a long time, who looked like a big boy named Duque. Kale, I'm not familiar with the Dalajan, but since you said that as long as you are a mage, you can attend classes in the Dalajan, publish papers, or do all kinds of things related to your identity as a mage to expand your influence. I happen to have time, so I'll give a few public classes. Phil's eyes lit up when he heard this. Oh, really, that's great. What class do you want to give? What's the topic? Duque smiled mysteriously. Basic practice of multicasting, and heat transfer theory of fire. Duque saw that Illusia's body trembled. These were her mother's excuses for letting her study with Duke. The eldest daughter of the Bear family raised her head in bewilderment. She did not know why Duke had chosen to be a guest lecturer at such a time. Kale, knew that it was because of his suggestion that Duke had decided to expand his influence and work hard to rebuild the Stormwind Kingdom's mages. Dalaran had an academy that was open to the public. As long as one paid a low fee, they would teach apprentices with magic aptitude the basics of magic. After a few years of screening, those who passed the test would officially become advanced apprentices or beginner magicians, and they would be allowed to enter a higher academy to further their studies. At this point, the Dalajan's learning and research would become quite liberalized. Basic magicians were allowed to study different subjects according to their talents and preferences. They could also study under the tutelage of any magician who was registered in the school. There was a precondition, the equivalent exchange that mages respected the most. Apart from the public classes that were advertised, all of the classes had to be paid. The academy would evaluate the practicality of the subject taught by the lecturer, the theoretical content, the standard of the lecture, and many other factors, and then set a price. The apprentice had to pay for it. Of course, if one wanted to learn more advanced content, they would have to pay the price of becoming the lecturer's disciple. Lecturers also had all sorts of requirements for apprentices. Some wanted money, some wanted the apprentice to provide spellcasting materials, and of course, most wanted the apprentice to be their experimental assistant. Of course, the children of rich families had it easier, but the children of poor families often had to work. Acolytes also had various ways to earn the necessary money. For example, the simplest way was to sell oneself to the Dalajan Mage Guild, sign a contract, and work for them for years in exchange for money. They either worked as mercenaries or created magic items to sell. There were both opportunities and responsibilities. This was the Dalajan. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as Duque showed enough strength, it wasn't impossible to recruit another group of mages. After all, the Stormwind Mage Guild only existed in name. All the mages added together could only fight 12 people. This was just the number of people in a small team. Apart from Duque and the retired old man Norton, everyone else was an earth mage. Duque smiled and wrote down a few advertising slogans. A duel of magic isn't as simple as you think. Still thinking about how to make a bigger fireball to defeat your opponent? Then you're out of date. The legendary mage who burned 100,000 orcs, Duke Marcus, will teach you multicasting. Once you learn it, you can definitely beat other mages of the same level. The three audience members looked at it and their faces turned pale. Arrogant, egotistical, and absolutely subversive. This was because, in the traditional Dalaran mages' teachings, the lecturers mostly taught how to deal with opponents who were also mages. They mostly taught how to build a magic shield and then bombard each other with a bigger fireball to destroy the opponent's shield and achieve victory. Well, a big fireball couldn't defeat the opponent. Then it must be because your fireball wasn't big enough. There was no enemy that a big fireball couldn't defeat. If there was, then 2 fireballs would be enough. Now, Duque actually overturned all the arguments of these academic lectures. If this wasn't subversive, then what was? If it was anyone else, they would definitely be criticized for being sensationalist, but Duque had a lot of achievements to back him up. Whether it was the battle against the demons in Karazhan and killing Medivh, the burning of the Elven Forest, the rescue of 50,000 elite soldiers with the ice ship, or most recently, the rescue of 4 kings from a large group of orc sword saint assassins with his own strength. All of them were dazzling achievements. Before there was better and more sufficient evidence to prove that Duque couldn't do it, no one could refute Duque. No one would be stupid enough to think that Duque was an academic mage. Duque was classified as a typical practical mage. No, to say that practical mages were weak. Because a practical mage could often fight 10 academic mages. Duque gave people the feeling that he was the kind of guy who wanted to fight 100. In the shortest amount of time, the news that the Alliance's deputy commander Duke Marcus was going to publicly teach practical magic in the Dalagen spread like wildfire throughout the Dalagen in the shortest amount of time. Chapter 281. Dalaran, which used to be bustling with activity, was now shrouded in an interesting and strange atmosphere. Hey, did you hear? That Duke Marcus is going to have an open class in the Dalagen. Open class? Which Duke Marcus? Idiot. He's the deputy commander of the newly established Lordaeron Alliance, Sir Marcus. He's a super wizard who fought against demons and killed a large number of elite beastmen. Is he really that powerful? It's a free open class anyway. It's a waste not to attend. Any wizard who was a sky wizard or above was qualified to attend the open class in the Dalagen's high-level magic academy. Every day, there would be announcements of all kinds of open classes on the academy's bulletin board. Because of the favoritism of a certain elf prince, and because Duque was sufficiently famous, Duque's open class was placed on the front page of the magic bulletin board all over the academy. Not only did it have a dazzling red border, but there were also many hands of magic, which symbolized Duque's signature skill, releasing fireballs to attack the image of a scarecrow. Naturally, this attracted a lot of attention. The Dalagen would decide the grade of the open class in a very simple way, and that was through student voting. Any apprentice or wizard could press their magic seal on the bulletin board to show their interest in the class. The day before the class started, they had to go to the Dalagen's curriculum system to confirm the class. The academy would confirm the location of the class the night before according to the number of people participating in the open class. The result of Duque's open class was, of course, popular. It was very simple. Duque was famous enough. He killed the demon king Sargeras, the successor of Karazhan, the Duke of Stormwind, the deputy commander of the Alliance, the youngest peak sky wizard of the current generation, the victim of 200,000 beastmen, and the wizard who could best use magic to coax peerless beauties. Any one of these could attract the attention of apprentices and wizards, not to mention all the glory and fame. The result of the unprecedented popularity of registration was that the number of applicants far exceeded the capacity of any Dalagen lecture hall. The Kirin Tor Council, which was actually Kale, had no choice but to announce that official mages would be given priority to attend the class, and the remaining places would be given to apprentices. They would be ranked according to their results, and the best batch of apprentices would be given the right to attend the class. 3 days later, more than 12,000 people attended Duque's lecture in the Dalagen's largest central lecture hall. The auditorium, which originally had a capacity of 10,000 people, had an additional 2,000 standing tickets. The auditorium was packed with people. As the central auditorium of the Dalagen people, its specifications were definitely off the charts. Even Duque was flabbergasted by the things that seemed scientific but were actually unscientific. For example, a sound transmission spell that could surround the entire auditorium would allow the voice on the podium to be clearly transmitted to every corner of the auditorium. Another example would be a huge magical image. In the auditorium of 10,000 people, Duque was just a small person to the friends sitting at the top of the mountain. But behind the podium, there was a huge screen that was as tall as 20 meters, which could magnify Duque's figure to an imposing extent. Even the audience in the last row could clearly see the hair on Duque's face. As for the central auditorium, it was usually only used in 2 situations. The first was the annual opening and ending ceremony of the Dalagen. Large numbers of apprentices, their attendants, friends, and followers would fill the auditorium. The other was when an important figure would give a lecture or a speech to the entire Dalagen. In the past 10 years, only Antonidas had enjoyed such treatment. Now, there was a situation that could be considered as the second one, Duke. In terms of battle achievements, Duke was definitely qualified. However, Duque only had the magical undulations of a sky mage, which made many Morningstar mages very unhappy. When Duque arrived at the scene with Elugia, someone immediately made a move. As soon as Duque went on stage, the wooden floor under his feet seemed to be under unimaginable pressure and was creaking. It wasn't just the wooden floor. The stone wall, the curtain, the door, and the huge glass window not far from Duque were all trembling as if they would fall apart at any moment. Elugia's face instantly turned pale. Prince Kale, who had arrived early in the first row in support of Duque, furrowed his long golden eyebrows. Spiritual attack. It was a common method for mages to test the strength of their opponents. For a moment, Kale, wanted to stop it, but he immediately gave up. Respect was not something that could be obtained by talking big. Duque enjoyed almost the same lofty treatment as Antonidas, so he naturally had to bear the corresponding pressure. Even though Duque was also a mage, and the Dalajan welcomed any mage to study in this sacred land of magic, Duque was, after all, not one of the Dalajan. After inheriting Karazhan and the inheritance of the guardian Mediv, who had once stood against the Dalajan, it was inevitable that Duque would be viewed with hostility by the Dalajan mages. In a sense, as a member of the Kirin Tor Council, Kale, should also help those guys. In the end, Kale, chose not to help either side. In the eyes of the group of Morningstar mages, a single Morningstar mage was enough to make Duque, a sky mage, depressed and make a big joke of himself. It would be best if Duque left, so that an outsider would not be able to strut around here. Chapter 282. In that instant, all the high-ranked wizards knew one thing. Duque was very strong. Some of them wanted to stop for a moment, but a low voice said something that seemed to have magical power, causing all the mages who wanted to retreat to straighten their backs. This is the Dalajan. This was the Dalajan, the holy land of magic. After the high elves had passed on magic to humans, almost all wizards who came here would prostrate themselves in worship. This place represented the greatest freedom in the world of magic, the most vast knowledge, and the ultimate holiness. Duque represented Karazhan. If Duque did not have a strong backing, if he did not have the title of Duke of Stormwind and the deputy commander of the Alliance, and if Karazhan had not disappeared from the Eastern Kingdom, perhaps some evil and greedy wizards would have challenged Duque for the right of ownership of Karazhan. Most importantly, Duque had made a fool of that fellow. That Morningstar wizard did not have much spiritual force, but he was wearing the violet robes of the Dalajan Higher Magic Academy. This reason was enough. Moreover, did Duque not cover the heads of the wizards with his spiritual force? This could be considered a provocation. The second challenger appeared immediately. Unlike the fellow in the third row, this time it was a Morningstar wizard in the second row. According to estimates, this was already a level 3 Morningstar wizard. Without any hesitation, this fellow condensed his spiritual force into an incomparably sharp spike, piercing towards Duque's spiritual force beast with an unknown shape and huge wings like the wind. In the world of spiritual force, just as the sharp spike was about to pierce through Duque's spiritual force beast, a claw with only 3 fingers grew out of the beast's body and closed in on it. Kacha. There was no sound in the world of spiritual force. This action itself seemed to have brought about a kacha sound. None of their eardrums received any vibrations from the sound, but everyone heard it as if they were hallucinating. As if an important part of his body had been forcibly broken, the level 3 Morningstar covered his head and curled up like a shrimp. Duque was still moving forward, neither too fast nor too slow. On the huge stage, under the illumination of the soft magic lamp, he walked toward the podium at a constant pace. He did not seem to notice the spiritual force attacks from the 2 Morningstar wizards at all, and continued walking with a faint smile and unparalleled confidence. Duque was clearly saying, "I'll leave enough time for you to attack." What an arrogant advertisement. An attitude that was 100 times more arrogant than an advertisement. They were treating the Dalajan advanced magicians like they were nothing. Not every Morningstar wizard was young and full of vigor. Many Morningstar wizards were no longer young, and they had no intention of fighting because of their age and experience. However, things were different now. The third Morningstar made his move. This time, his spiritual force condensed into a ball and turned into a cannonball, shooting towards Duque's spiritual force beast. It was still the same claw. Like flicking a melon seed, the claw flicked lightly, and the cannonball was shot back at a speed faster than when it came. The fellow hurriedly activated his spiritual force shield, but it was useless. The speed was just too fast. Even if it was his own spiritual energy that came over, suddenly receiving a surge of chaotic spiritual energy was not something he could withstand. He clutched his chest in pain and pointed at Duque, unable to say a single word. The fourth Morningstar was sitting at the side of the first row. This Morningstar wizard was obviously one of the best among the Morningstars. Whether he was a level 7 or 8, Duque did not know. All he knew was that this fellow's spiritual force had turned into a 3-meter-tall giant with a blurry figure. It wielded a giant axe and chopped down at Duque's beast. This fellow was too much. If the attacks from the other three were mainly probing attacks, this fellow was definitely going all out. Even though they did not dare to underestimate Duque, a spiritual force attack of this level could destroy the opponent's magic circuits and turn him into a cripple. Duque furrowed his brows, his expression turning cold for the first time. This time, the beast's counterattack was a long tail. A tail that was at least 10 meters long and as thick as a bison's body swept towards them. The mages could even sense the clear scales on the tail. Asterisk crack. Asterisk the handle of the giant axe, the giant's head, and even half of the giant's body were all crushed by this incomparably heavy tail with an even higher concentration of spiritual force. Ugh! This fellow vomited blood on the spot. Bright red blood flowed out from the gaps between the fingers of his left hand that he had covered his mouth. At the same time, the tiles under his feet and the chair he had made were all turned to dust. He fell to the ground pathetically, unable to sit up no matter what. In the first row, no less than 5 Morningstars looked at each other and nodded in unison, almost indiscernible. It was not an excessive spiritual force attack, and the level of the attack was reduced to that of a probing attack. However, this was a probing attack that was close to going all out. Be it a sword, a spear, an arrow, a stinger, or a hammer, 5 different spiritual force weapons attacked Duque in unison, arriving in front of Duque's spiritual force beast almost at the same time. Anyone could see that Duque's spiritual force beast had been specially made into the form of a dragon. Most of the wizards snorted. It took a lot of effort to make the spiritual energy look like this. Everyone agreed that it would weaken the offensive power of the spiritual energy. Since the brain would put extra effort into forming the form, most mages would choose to use the more simple and practical form of the spiritual energy. This did not include Duque. With the help of the system elf, Duque would not only make a dragon, he could even make a Ultraman and play with the death ray. What Duque valued the most was the system scan, which helped him instantly identify the weak point of the opponent's spiritual force. In every wizard's spiritual force ball, the quality and quantity of spiritual force were not evenly distributed, which gave Duque a chance. Duque was not superior to his opponent in terms of quality and quantity, but Duque only needed to find the weak point of his opponent's spiritual force, or even the weak point, and that would be enough. In the vision of spiritual force, the wizards could sense that Duque's dragon had finally revealed its true form. However, when the 5 large spiritual force weapons attacked, the dragon's claws suddenly lengthened, and 2 kitchen knives appeared in its claws. At this moment, Elucia, who was trembling behind Duque, heard Duque's soft voice. 56 consecutive meteor blast slash. The spiritual force blades danced at high speed, stirring up a storm that instantly engulfed the space between Duque and the 5 Morningstar wizards. In the blink of an eye, the 5 wizards collapsed into their seats. Chapter 283. Impossible. This was absolutely impossible. How could a sky wizard resist, defeat so many Morningstar wizards in the domain of spiritual force? Looking at the wizards who looked like frostbitten eggplants, no one could say a word. It felt like these Morningstar wizards, who were rather famous in the Dalagen, were complete fools, each of them extending their faces for Duque to slap. It wasn't just an ordinary slap, but one that grabbed their collars and slapped them back and forth until their faces were swollen. A total of 9 wizards, 1 sky star and 8 morning stars, had charged forward in the most shameful form of attrition warfare. In the end, they had been defeated by 1 person against 9, and all of them had been defeated without even catching their breath. Did they not see Duque slowly walk across the podium in an incomparably confident manner? In the huge hall, apart from Duque's footsteps, there was almost no other sound. Of the 12,000 people in the hall, not a single one was an ordinary person. They were either official wizards or acolytes. As long as they were acolytes, they would be able to sense the spiritual force undulations from the battle between Duque and them. Everyone was very clear about the probing effect of releasing their spiritual power. Evidently, even the acolytes who had not seen the whole picture knew. Duque had obtained complete victory. 1 against 9. If Duque was not a foreign wizard, and if Duque was a lecturer from the Dalajan, then what would be welcoming Duque would definitely be thunderous applause. The acolytes and novice wizards were all agitated. In this huge fan-shaped hall, everyone's gaze was on the first row. After all, only the high-ranked wizards there could defeat, challenge Duque successfully. In the middle of the first row, there were still a few publicly acknowledged Morning Star wizards. However, they were unmoved, as if they were the best students, listening attentively. In reality, the real focus was on the only Radiant Moon wizard present. The High Elf Prince of Kuel Salis. If Kale, that's made a move, even 10 Duques would be defeated. But would Kale, that's make a move? What a joke. Kaizi was here to support Duque. Seeing that Kale, that's had maintained a gentle and refined smile ever since Duque had appeared, the Morning Star wizards who still had the slightest intention of challenging Kale, that's gave up on finding trouble with this incomparably evil sky wizard. 1 step, 2 steps, 5 steps, 10 steps, step by step, Duque walked up to the podium. His figure was magnified by the huge projection screen behind him. At this moment, the first round of applause sounded in the venue. Applauding before the lecturer begins is a form of courtesy, a form of welcome. However, with Kale, that Sunstrider leading the applause, it was a grand welcome and support that could not be any more grand. Kale, that wasn't clapping from his chair. He was standing up and clapping for Duque. Immediately, the second round of applause rang out. This was from the little princess of Kuel Tiras, Jaina Proudmoore. This mage apprentice of noble birth had long been the dream lover of countless mage apprentices. However, she seemed to be a little close to Prince Arthas of Lordaeron, and the apprentices could only suppress their admiration. The third round of applause rang out almost at the same time as the second. It was from the person most young wizards pursued, Miss Ilucia Barov of the ancient noble bloodline of the Arather Empire. Even though she was standing not far behind Duque as an assistant, her real attitude still caused a silent uproar. It was only then that the people in the auditorium truly realized that the person standing on the podium was not only a true mage, but also a noble existence who was deeply trusted and respected by the upper echelons of various countries. There was no more hesitation. Immediately, thunderous applause rang out in the auditorium. It was so loud that it was enough to make people outside think that some kind of terrifying experiment had exploded. Duque's hands pressed down, and after a while, the applause gradually stopped. Clearing his throat, Duque's slightly magnetic voice spread to every corner of the auditorium. I'm very happy that so many people have come to listen to Duke Marcus's lecture today. In the following time, I will explain the importance of multicasting and the basic training methods. I hope that my lecture will be of help to everyone on the path of magic. Magic is a mysterious field. I think that the first thing that every lucky person who is qualified to step into this field should do is not to be bound by common sense. What the? This can't be done, oh, that's impossible. These are the most unacceptable thoughts. So we have to free our imagination. Here, I will first demonstrate the benefits of multicasting. After saying that, Duque turned his head to Ilucia. Miss Barov, later when you have a magical shield, please attack each other with the lowest level of level 1 fireball. And please do not use any metamagic abilities, and try to maintain the power of the fireball between 14 to 22 MP, Ilusia nodded. Magic points were the standard to measure the damage caused by a spell. 14 MP meant that if it hit, it would cause 14 points of basic damage to a creature with no magic resistance. In the next moment, when Ilusia indicated that she was ready, the two of them bombarded each other under the supervision of the magic scale. 1. 5 seconds of casting time, the same amount of mana consumption, 16 points and 22 points of damage. This is what you all know as using a bigger fireball to deal with the opponent, right? As soon as Duque's voice fell, the audience burst into laughter that they were trying to hold back. However, when using a level 10 fireball, the casting time becomes 5 seconds. Normally, the person with the bigger fireball wins, right? That's right. An apprentice shouted. All right, now I will split the mana required for a level 10 fireball, and then continuously bombard Miss Barov. Everyone, see the results. Ilusia was still chanting, attacking Duque with a level 10 fireball every 5 seconds. Duque, on the other hand, used 2 magician's hands, a total of 3 level 5 fireballs, with a speed of 5 seconds between each fireball, bombarding Ilusia in succession. Everyone was immediately surprised to see that Ilusia, whose magical shield was continuously bombarded, was quickly showing signs of defeat under the situation of the total amount of mana consumption. Although the continuous attacks were not considered powerful, it was obvious that the magic attacks impacted her shield, which affected her concentration, causing the chanting time to be extended. At the beginning, Ilusia could barely maintain the completion time of 2 or 3 fireballs within 4 seconds, but towards the end, the fireball, which was as common as eating and drinking to most official mages, actually took a full 6 seconds to shoot out 1 fireball. Everyone could see that both damage and accuracy were greatly reduced. Chapter 284. Just as Duque's 12th fireball hit Ilusia's magic shield in a 3-on-1 situation, the shield, which should have lasted longer, suddenly exploded. Looking at the fireball that was heading straight for her, Ilusia let out a cry of surprise. Everyone thought that Duque's fireball was about to destroy the flower, and there were even some apprentices who could not bear to see the beautiful Miss Barov disfigured. At this moment, Duque snapped his fingers, and all the fireballs that flew out actually made an elegant circle in the air, circling 180 degrees, and returned to Duque's side, floating in the air. Duque raised his hand, and all the fireballs disappeared. Duque's voice sounded again. I did not use other metamagic abilities to bully Miss Barov just now. This technique is actually similar to when people are facing the siege of 3 mages or magic apprentices who are of a lower level than themselves, and are often flustered by the enemy's continuous attacks. It's just that after mastering multicasting, you become the one fighting with the many. In order to leave a deeper impression, please take a look at the following footage. What Duque was showing on the magic screen was the footage of him using 108 hands of magic to rain down arcane missiles on the orc army at the Red Ridge Mountain, using the simplest arcane missiles to form an exaggerated barrage. The lowest level of magic caused the most gorgeous massacre. This kind of epic-making real war documentary gave the strongest psychological impact. Just 2 minutes of footage, more than 11,000 apprentices were mesmerized. Not every apprentice with magic aptitude had the opportunity to become an official mage. Below, in addition to those young faces, there were middle-aged magic craftsmen, white-haired human elders in their 70s or 80s, and high elves who did not have much aptitude but resolutely left their countries to seek the truth of magic. These people all had the same dream, the dream of making themselves stronger in magic. For a moment, too many people's breathing quickened. A hand was raised and Duque called his name. Please speak. Excuse me, does learning multicasting require specific talent? This was the focus of everyone's attention. I can only say that those with talent will make faster progress in learning the supreme magical skills of multicasting. However, I believe that everyone can learn this technique after rigorous self-training. At the very least, it can greatly improve their spellcasting ability. Duque used a magic pen to write the words multitasking on the special magic board on the podium. The words were clearly reflected on the big screen. Multicasting is the most basic of the basics. If you have enough biological knowledge, you will know that whether it is humans or elves, the brain is actually divided into left and right parts. Duque had a more convenient method. Of course, the essence of spellcasting is to use the incantation to mobilize the magic power in the body and connect it to the elemental world or the outside world. Brilliant mages can do all this in their own spiritual world. But I have a simpler method, and that is to use echoes. Duque snapped his fingers, and several walls made of arcane energy appeared in the void beside him. Duque said something casually, and the echoes echoed throughout the venue. Echoes? He actually thought of creating echoes to complete the necessary steps of multicasting? Obviously, this was another epic-making genius idea. For a moment, the audience was in awe, and once again there was a thunderous applause. This time, the applause lasted for nearly a minute. Duque's hands pressed down, and it took a long time for the applause to gradually stop. Someone asked again, "So, how to create echoes when casting?" Duque smiled evilly. "Sorry, student, this is already a fee. I haven't thought about how to charge you, but it will be announced in 2 or 3 days." Suddenly, there was another burst of laughter. Next, Duque said a lot more. For example, he used the theory of thermodynamics to explain the flow of fire elements. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Chapter 285. Duque, with the knowledge of a transmigrator and an engineering and equipment major, systematically explained to more than 10,000 people what fire was, the nature of fire, and the characteristics of fire. For the magic apprentices in the world of Azeroth, this was an almost new theoretical system, but it did not conflict with the magic knowledge they had learned before. They were simply fascinated by it. Some official mages wanted to find Duque's faults and refute Duque, but they could not find a single flaw in his words. For example, heat will only flow from a high temperature to a low temperature. For example, if the temperature of a fire is high, it can heat up cold water. These seemingly easy-to-understand things, after being systematically explained by professional thermodynamics theory, almost all magic apprentices realized that their fireball would definitely improve. Fireball was not to be underestimated. As the first damaging spell that most magic apprentices learned, the popularity of Fireball could be said to be 100%. It was no exaggeration to say that the thermodynamics theory that Duque had brought over had an obvious effect on the improvement of the magic level of the entire Dalagen. When the last grain of sand in the magic hourglass that was specially used to measure time fell and a pleasant hum sounded on the podium, Duque just happened to say, "Today's class ends here. My lecture is over." His timing was so precise that he did not seem like a young man at all, but the most experienced teacher. For a moment, the audience was in an uproar. "Lecturer Marcus, don't stop so quickly. Speak more. Speak more. We still want to listen." "Lecturer, that's great." After a brief uproar, everyone seemed to realize that Duque would definitely not delay the class. Immediately, there was an earth-shattering applause in the huge auditorium. Clap, 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 clap. The applause was like an endless tsunami, lasting for a long time. Apart from the unlucky few who left early in the morning due to injuries, every magic apprentice, every official mage who came to listen to the lecture, and of course, Kale, that's all stood up and gave Duque the most sincere applause. After the applause stopped, Kale, that's had already come to the podium with a bright smile on his face. "Wonderful, Duque. Your lecture has completely exceeded the limits of my imagination. I thought you were best at actual combat, but I didn't expect your theoretical knowledge to be just as rich. I can't even tell if you're a practical or an academic." Although Kale, that's really wanted to ask if these theories came from Mediva's Karazhan library, asking now would undoubtedly help Duque start a fight. Kale, that's was simply happy for Duque. On the other side, Jaina had already become a fan. She chased after Duque and asked him all sorts of questions in admiration. "Brother Marcus, do you accept disciples? Why don't I become your disciple?" Right now, Jaina was still a rather innocent girl. Her watery blue eyes made it easy for people to feel sorry for her, so she agreed immediately. "Don't you worship Antonidas?" Duque blurted out. "Hey, how did you know?" Only then did Duque realize that he had spilled the beans, but it was easy to make up for it. Who in the Dalagen doesn't worship Master Antonidas? That's true. But Master is very busy. Recently, he said he was injured, but everyone knows that he's actually in the laboratory every day. A flock of non-existent crows flew over Duque's head. "Antonidas, can you be more professional at pretending to be sick? Even a 12-year-old girl knows that you're pretending." Of course, Duque had no interest in provoking Jaina. Leaving aside her vacillating personality between war and peace, Duque had no confidence in teaching Jaina. He knew his own business. Duque was not a pure academic. Duque himself was half-baked in the real magic theories of this world. Even if Duque was unhappy with Jaina, who had cursed his father to death in the history, Jaina was still one of the more capable heroes in the history of the Alliance. She would be a core existence in too many major events in the future. Messing with Jaina's growth would make the future even more uncontrollable. Duque grandly refused. "My apologies, Princess Proudmoore. I'm actually very busy. This time, I'm here mainly to visit Master Antonidas and help Stormwind recruit some mages to rebuild the Stormwind Royal Mages." At this time, there were many people in front of the stage. When everyone heard this, they immediately understood. Duque did not hide his purpose. The world of mages was about equivalent exchange. Cheating was a bad idea. Duque smiled and turned to Alicia. "My assistant, I'll leave the answer to my questions about accepting disciples to you. Become my disciple or assistant, and you will receive my guidance and the right to read the bottom 3 levels of the Karazhan Grand Library for free. The price is to join the Stormwind Royal Mages as my disciple and fight for the Alliance and Stormwind for 3 years. Just like joining the Dalagen Mages could get all kinds of benefits, Duque's recruitment was also very open. It was both a risk and an opportunity. When she heard that she had the obligation to fight, Jaina knew that she had no chance. Her father would not allow the underage Jaina to get involved in the war. In fact, Dailin had already informed her that if the Dalagen was in danger, there would be a specialized group of mages that would teleport her back to Kul Tiras in the shortest time possible. Jaina sighed. "Looks like I can only wait until this war is over before I have the chance to visit Marcus." Duque smiled and did not say anything. After the lecture, Duque was immediately captured by Antonidas. When he came to Antonidas' laboratory again, the white-haired old man did not treat Duque so well. "Oh, Duque, this is not very kind of you. You will weaken the Dalagen's war potential." Duque shrugged his shoulders. Of course, he knew that even though the Dalagen had always pursued a liberal policy, where the nobles of other countries could hire any apprentice or official mages who had not signed a slave contract, that was during times of peace. Now was the time between the war between the Alliance and the Horde. Of course, the Dalagen had its own considerations. Duque's blatant recruitment would not cause any problems on the surface, but he was afraid that the Kirin Tor Parliament would make things difficult for the Alliance. Duque bowed deeply. "For the future and war potential of the Dalagen, I am willing to make 1,000 copies of Karazhan's magic books and give them to the Great Dalagen Library." Antonida's long white eyebrows twitched. 5,000 copies, 100 mages, 300 apprentices. 2,000 copies, 500 mages, 1,000 apprentices. Why don't you just rob them? The Kirin Tor Parliament's president was furious. Wrong, it's easy to rob them. Duque obviously knew the importance of those magic books. He was not worried that Antonidas would not take the bait. Knowledge was power. That's too many. At most, 200 mages and 500 apprentices. Thus, the two of them, who could shake the Alliance with just a stomp of their feet, began to bicker like aunties in the market in this laboratory where there were no outsiders. The final price was 3,000 copies of magic books in exchange for 200 official mages and 500 apprentices. Chapter 286. In the Hillsbrad Hills, there was a stone castle standing on a hill. This was the temporary palace of the Stormwind royal family. Almost every day, new decorations were brought into the castle, be it rockery or beautiful marble statues, or replacing the previously terrible floor tiles. King Lang repeatedly said that the kingdom did not have the financial surplus to pay the stonemasons' wages. The stonemasons expressed their gratitude towards Duque for saving their lives. Since they had nothing to do in the winter after building the blockhouses, they could find some stones to practice with. However, the stonemasons also expressed that when rebuilding Stormwind City in the future, they still needed to pay the required wages, but only at the cost price. Lang expressed his agreement. Looking at the so-called refugee camp that was becoming more and more prosperous, Lang was quite speechless. It was already quite inappropriate to call this a refugee camp. It was completely the prototype of a new city. The 3-meter-high stone wall could accommodate 3 people walking side by side, protecting nearly 500,000 residents. The newly cultivated fields in the distance were all protected by huge wooden fences. Every 300 meters or so, there was a wooden 10-meter-high arrow tower that could monitor all directions of the fields without any blind spots. There was nothing lacking in the city. The market, medical, sanitation, fire protection, water supply, city guards, and all the other buildings were arranged in an orderly manner. In a city that lacked money, there was no such thing as the state taking care of everything. All food and daily necessities had to be exchanged through labor. About 30% of the food harvested in the autumn was handed over to the Ministry of Civil Affairs of Storm Kingdom, except for the portion that was necessary for each family. In return, the Ministry of Civil Affairs would issue a batch of vouchers with a stamp and an equivalent amount of money. These vouchers could be used to exchange for cloth and other daily necessities at the market. The rest of the work was similar. Whether it was logging or mining, all supplies were collected in proportion, and the workers received vouchers as wages for the rest. Despite the obvious lack of money, the entire refugee camp was like a self-sufficient independent kingdom, operating extremely well. It was completely unimaginable that half a year ago, this was a group of refugees who had almost given up on life and the future. One day in December, looking at the black smoke rising from the chimneys in the city, Lang felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. On this day, Anduin Lothar returned. Lang and Anduin gave each other a warm hug. Anduin, what's the situation? Sigh, in winter, I, the commander of the Alliance, am a beggar, holding a broken jar and going around begging. I only got a bunch of promises that I don't know if they'll be fulfilled. There's nothing substantial at all. It was precisely because there was no one else that Anduin could complain so presumptuously. A promise is better than no promise at all. Lang asked a servant to bring him a cup of hot wine. When Anduin first came in, he did not see it clearly. Seeing that the room was already very presentable, Anduin clenched his fists. Damn it, am I seeing things? Why do I feel like I've returned to Storm Fortress? It does look like it, doesn't it? Lang shrugged. I didn't force the stonemasons to make these things. Anyway, it's Duque's favor. Anduin combed his hair with his fingers. Sigh, compared to him, I feel that my diplomatic skills are terrible. Yes, what good news does that kid have? Is a new team of mages from the Storm King family considered good news? 200 official mages and 500 mage apprentices. Although they've only signed a 3-year contract. Lothar's eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Is old man Antonidas willing to let them go? Duque said that he used a copy of Karazhan's magic book to exchange for them. I don't know anything about magic. Anyway, what he said was true. Since Stormwind had put in so much effort to help collect it, it's definitely worth it to exchange a dungeon for these people. Of course, I agree. Agree. Oh my god, that kid is too impressive. Lothar patted Lang's shoulder hard. Ryan had a faint bitter smile on his face. But you're still not happy? If this goes on, there's hope for us to recover Stormwind. Lothar said as he gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. Anduin, actually, I've been thinking. If we can recover Stormwind, why don't we give Duque the title of king? This topic was a little too heavy, and Lothar could not react for a while. Think about it. We all know that Duque is actually not from Stormwind. But how much has he done for us? Without him, perhaps there would only be 10,000 to 20,000 refugees left in Stormwind. I would have died in Stormwind City long ago, either at the hands of Garona or with Stormwind City. I know that you'll take good care of William for me. Maybe you'll also become the commander of the Alliance. But how much authority do you have? You don't even have an army under your direct command. Even if you lead the Alliance to defeat the Horde in the future, how many people will help you and William restore the country? But look outside, Anduin. Outside the window were 500,000 well-fed citizens of the Storm Kingdom, who could safely survive the winter, and 100,000 elite soldiers who were full of morale and were willing to die for the kingdom. Before the arrival of winter, perhaps more citizens who had gone to other countries will rush back. This is all possible with Duque's help. Duque's ability is not inferior to any founding ruler in human history. At this point, Lang fell silent. That was the truth. The stability of the South Shore refugee camp had attracted the citizens who had previously left. The soldiers that had been lost in the Battle of South Shore had also been quickly replenished. If it weren't for the difficulty of raising soldiers, it would not be impossible to gather all the young and strong people to form an army of 200,000. Of course, all the young and strong people in the refugee camp had begun to receive military training. There were still plenty of reserve soldiers. Thoradin the Great is great, but as the capital of the Arathar Empire, the torrential fort declined after a short period of time. The other city-states have become independent kingdoms, such as Rotterdam and the Dalagen. There are still many enemies for humans. If this is an unstoppable trend, why not just let them go? Have you asked Duque? Anduin suddenly asked. But you can imagine that Duque also has subordinates, and Duque also has people who support him. When that time comes, it won't be a matter of whether Duque wants to or not. Lang sighed again. I, who once destroyed a country, have thought through everything now. Anyway, I will go with the flow. After the restoration of the country, Duque can be conferred the title of king if he wants. If he doesn't want to be conferred the title of king, I will give him the treatment of a prince, and I will set up a national policy that will be passed on to William and his future descendants. It will be enough if Stormwind can preserve most of the elven forest. All right, I also agree to it. It depends. Lothar finally nodded. Chapter 287. The harsh winter left most people with nothing to do. Of course, Duque would not waste this time. In the Hillsbrad Hills, in a huge wooden hall, there were many veterans who had experienced the war with the orcs. They might not be able to fight on the battlefield due to various injuries, but they used their own words and deeds to teach the new soldiers how to face the orcs. Not only that, the Nagas under Duque were once again put to use, continuing to train the soldiers with similar battles. In Karazhan, Duque finally had the time to come back, and then Khadgar ran away in tears. Master, I miss you so much. I'm bored to death. Duque used all his strength to resist, using his hand to stop Khadgar's crying soul. Damn it, oh no, you're a ghost. You're not the only one here. Where's Michael? The Einherjars are all here. I have nothing to talk to those muscular men. I really don't understand why they still run every day when they're already Einherjars. Duque was speechless. It's probably because they have nothing to do if they don't fight demons, right? Duke suddenly understood why the upper nobles of the High Elves were so decadent. With unlimited life force, a boring life was the easiest to corrode the soul. Okay, get ready. I have a large group of apprentices coming, living people. Duque told Khadgar about how he had kidnapped a group of mages in the Dalagen. Yes, master, I will ask Michael and the others to clean up the room. Actually, I don't plan to let them stay in Karazhan for too long. After all, Karazhan is in a crack in space and time. I don't know if living here for a long time will have any negative effects on their bodies. I plan to let them come to the library 3 times a week to borrow and return magic books. You just need to be a good librarian. Open up the library for books below the Earth Mage level to them. Khadgar's soul put its hands on its hips. But at least I won't be so lonely. Those who came to follow Duque were naturally not high-level mages. The official mages were all Earth mages from relatively poor backgrounds. They could neither become a famous teacher like Krasis, nor could they afford the exorbitant tuition fees. One had to know that everything in the Dalajan was equivalent exchange. Even if one were to sell oneself to the Dalajan mages, the money obtained would only be enough to read a limited number of magic books. How could it compare to the unlimited reading in Karazhan? Besides, he could attend Duque's lectures 3 times a week in Hilsbrad's classroom. In fact, Duque wasn't fooling them. Duque's simplified fire elemental magic formulas that the system elves had deduced could allow their strength to improve greatly. The simplest example was that after training, every official mage would be pleasantly surprised to find that they had begun to master the 2 metamagic abilities, Enhanced Fireball and Flame Throw. In the highest level of Karazhan, Duque set up a series of protective spell formations. These were things he had learned from the books in Karazhan. It was not enough to defend against true experts, but morning stars were not a problem. With Karazhan's own defenses, it was still very safe. System notification detected that the host has a large amount of professional knowledge related to refrigeration. Relevant knowledge is being imported. Thermodynamic fundamentals, hydrodynamic pumps and fans, refrigeration principles and equipment, air conditioning principles and equipment, refrigeration process design, refrigeration and air conditioning automation, refrigeration and air conditioning engineering. Knowledge import complete. Optimizing the magic circuit model of Crown of Ice. Optimization complete. Beginning modification of the host's original magic model. The next moment, Duque felt as if he had fallen from a warm world into an icy hell. Chapter 288. The 3-element pharaoh was a freak. However, in Duque's memories, only Medivh and Khadgar were 3-element pharaoh. The rest were mostly fire or ice. Even though the system elf had fully calculated the possible consequences of practicing the Crown of Ice, and considered the possibility of fire and water being incompatible, Duque had still severely underestimated this. Logically speaking, that Phoenix Flames, which had the home advantage, should have the absolute upper hand. Thus, before reorganizing his arcane spell circuit and adding the Crown of Frost, Duque deliberately weakened the arcane spell circuit's supply of arcane energy to the flame spell circuit. What Duque did not expect was that the optimized Crown of Ice would actually turn the tables on him and take the initiative to snatch all the energy ports of the arcane circuit. What the F***ck? Duque cursed. A system elf? Why is the Crown of Ice suppressing the Phoenix Flames? Aren't the 2 circuit models of the same level? Oh, dear host, let me calculate for a moment. Beep, calculation completed. It seems to be because the Phoenix Flames is the basic version for beginners, while the Crown of Ice is the advanced version for advancing wizards. The latter is more complete. In order for the host to advance to a Morning Star wizard, the Crown of Ice has begun to absorb all the energy in the surroundings for advancement. Duque suddenly realized that not only had the icy circuit cut off the energy source of the Phoenix Flames, this overbearing magic model had actually begun to erode the fire circuit, attempting to transform it into ice. Wait, if this goes on, what will happen to my magic circuit? Beep, the latest deduction. If the host is unable to control the spread of the icy circuit, after advancing to the Morning Star realm, the icy circuit will dominate all circuits except the most basic arcane circuit, and will prevent other types of circuits from being produced in the host's body. At this moment, Duque's heart skipped a beat, as if it had been petrified by magic. Then a gust of wind blew, turned to ash, turned to ash. Damn it. Without another word, Duque flipped the table in his mind. What happened to the 3-element pharaoh? How could ice magic alone be enough? There was no good ending for those who were partial to certain subjects. Thinking back to history, weren't all the ice mages who specialized in the ice element beaten up in the end? Antonidas was pushed by Arthes. Kel, Thuzad, who had become a frost lich, was pushed down by 40 players. Jaina's defense of Mount Hyjal could not withstand Archimonde's frenzied attacks. But I don't want a simple frost circuit. Then I can only ask the host to enter his spiritual world and obtain complete control of the Crown of Ice. However, this is very dangerous. If the host fails, your soul may forever be trapped in the depths of your own spiritual sea. It was constantly encouraging Duque to use it to make more stairs, or to use it anywhere that the ice circuit could be used. How long had passed? He didn't know. Duque's consciousness was numb and blurry. There was no hunger in his stomach. Instead, in the process of continuously using the ice circuit, Duque only felt that the aura of ice had penetrated his limbs and bones, becoming his body and his life. He lowered his head and looked down. As Duque continued to build and climb the mountain, he had already made an extremely long spiral staircase. Every step was crystal clear, as if it was carved from the purest white marble. On both sides of the long staircase, there were 2 exquisite ice handrails. Between each long staircase, there was an icicle that was as thick as a thigh connecting the north, south, east, and west directions. It seemed to be a support, but it also seemed to be a marker for Duque to calculate the number of laps for himself. In Duque's field of vision, the lonely peak became thinner and thinner as it went down. Finally, it turned into a straight black line that pierced deep into this world filled with water vapor. What was the end of this place? Duque suddenly realized that if this continued, he would be completely lost in this world. His consciousness, which had become muddled because of the ice, suddenly began to operate again. No, I'm here to conquer the crown of ice. No matter how beautiful the crown is, it's just a decoration on my head. The crown is only noble because of the identity of the king. It's not that I have to beg for the recognition of the crown. I am you, the master of the crown of ice. I order you to either destroy me, or come out and fight me. Chapter 289. It seemed to be responding to Duque's shouts, but it also seemed to be acknowledging that Duque had truly laid the foundation of the ice circuit while continuously creating the stairs of ice. This cold world finally began to change. The white clouds that were rolling and surging under his feet seemed to have suddenly become violent. The movement that was like a gentle breeze and drizzle earlier became a turbulent wave. In the blink of an eye, the surface of the clouds bulged and formed a huge hill of water vapor. With a loud splash, the cloud layer that was supposed to be in a gaseous state suddenly turned into a liquid state in the blink of an eye. The clouds below turned into a sea that stretched to the horizon. Seeing that the sky had turned into the horizon, Duque was tongue-tied. Indeed, it was too stupid to focus on science or reason in the spiritual world. This huge lake that seemed to have as much water as the Lordaeron Mill Lake next to the Lordaeron capital seemed to have gathered together in just 3 seconds. A pair of incomparably huge arms made of pure lake water stretched out from the huge hill of water. Then, an eye that was even bigger than a carriage lit up on the huge hill of water. It was a water elemental that was even bigger than a titan. As the saying went, gentle as water. Sorry, this thing's temper did not seem to have the so-called gentleness of water at all. Instead, it was even more irritable than the fire dragon. It did not even shout, "Go to hell." With a wave of its arm, it smashed its arm toward Duque like a flying axe. Due to the problem of vision, as long as the distance was far enough, even the largest thing would still be small. Visually, the water elemental giant was only the size of a palm. However, when the water arm that was bent at a right angle approached, Duque could clearly estimate the size of the water ball in a real sense. He immediately cursed in his heart. This was a huge water weapon that was more than 50 meters long on one side and shaped like a boomerang. Duque could not think of how to describe this thing, but he was extremely sure that even if this thing did not cause fatal damage to him in the first attack, it would kill him in the subsequent second attack. That's right. A drop of water was nothing to a human. But to an ant, it was enough to drown the ant. Right now, Duque was that ant. As a water elemental creature, it would definitely drown Duque in its most proficient water manipulation skill. Perhaps some people would say, would Duque drown now that he was a spiritual entity? Duque didn't know, but Duque's intuition told him that once he was hit, he would be done for. Was dodging useful? It was impossible to estimate how many water elements were born after the sea of clouds turned into water. In Duque's peripheral vision, there were water elementals in the shape of muscular men showing off their prowess on the surface of the water around him. Tilting his head slightly, Duque spat out the words with a smirk, "Ice Age?" The ice circuit had formed an independent small universe in Duque's body. The cold aura inside was constantly splitting and multiplying like atomic fission. From 1 to 2, from 2 to 4, from 4 to infinity. Duque merely stomped his foot, and a cold aura that was even more terrifying than the apocalyptic tsunami instantly swept the entire world. When the huge wave arrived, there should have been a loud rumble caused by the vast body of water, but now there was only the sound of rapid freezing. The white wave quickly slowed down and advanced. The huge wave that should have been like a black hole or a whirlpool was still advancing. However, at the top of the wave, there were even more huge ice blocks that were as large as mountains. The ice blocks were churning, but when the ice blocks collided with each other, only ice crystals were scattered. The flowing water body became less and less. Finally, after 20 seconds, the roar of heaven and earth gradually subsided. What appeared in front of Duque was a frozen and dead world. At this moment, everything suddenly disappeared. The surroundings turned into a pitch-black void, and a pure white and gorgeous crown appeared in front of Duque. A magnetic neutral voice said, "Wear me, and I will grant you the supreme power of ice." Chapter 290. After going through so many hardships, traversing almost endless stairs, overturning a huge amount of water elements, he finally arrived in front of the crown of ice, and was bestowed with the power of ice. Well, if Duque was really born and raised in Azeroth, he might have eagerly put on the crown. Unfortunately, Duque wasn't. At this time, whoever wore it would automatically have the aura of a moron. Not only would it be a trap for himself, but it would also trap others. Oh, a demon from the crack of space and time. I don't know what you are. But if you want to trick me, it's too simple. Duque laughed coldly. That's right. The crown of ice was a magic circuit model, and it was impossible for it to have so many twists and turns. The only explanation was that something had snuck into Karazhan and was lying in ambush in this place with the most arcane energy, waiting for its prey to take the bait. It was very likely that it wasn't its main body, because if it was its main body, it wouldn't be able to hide from Khadgar and Duque's defense and alarm circles. But a trace of a soul was a different story. This was Karazhan, located above the crack in the astral plane. It wouldn't be strange for anything to sneak in. After all, Duque didn't have enough power and time to completely clean up this place. Fortunately, Duque had always been vigilant. In the next instant, the crown of ice suddenly had a master. A lich whose lower body was floating in the air like a few flower petals, and her upper body was covered in chains that kept spinning back and forth. She wore a purple, black and red magic robe, and her skull was in the shape of a skull. She used her claws to wear the crown of ice. For some reason, this evil existence that appeared in Duque's spiritual world was a little familiar. Beside her, a group of warriors with purple eyes, wearing black and purple heavy armor, and a large group of people in purple and black robes, who were neither human nor ghost, all knelt on one knee and placed their left hands on their chest, showing their utmost respect to the current owner of the crown of ice. Mortal, you don't understand the power and terror of the Burning Legion at all. Do you think that temporarily trapping the great Commander Sardras will stop the Burning Legion from conquering the world of Azeroth? You're too naive. Nothing can stop the Burning Legion, not even the Creation Titans. Not to mention an ant like you. You have obstructed the Burning Legion time and time again, and you even intend to support the resistance to unite. You are seeking your own death. I am the daughter of Frost, the incarnation of death, the great dead speaker. 7 gigantic ice blue magic circles spread out with her palm as the center. One was directly behind her, and the other 6 were distributed in a hexagonal pattern. As soon as she finished speaking, the magic array trembled inexplicably. Bang! Duque looked inside his body through the system. Now, his magic circuits were finally starting to look decent. Each huge circuit had countless thin, thread-like circuits. They were like a bundle of wires tied into a circle, and the countless small circuits formed a huge circuit. The 3 huge circuits of ice, fire, and arcane were like 3 connected rings. They were connected to each other and had their own independent sides, but sometimes they complemented each other. Although Crown of Ice and Phoenix Flames could directly draw power from the elemental realm, they also relied on the most core arcane circuit to support them. Before practicing Crown of Ice, only the arcane and fire circuits of Duque were relatively strong. If he used too much ice magic, it would lose its strength. Now, it was completely different. Now that there were 3 circuits, it was truly a trident. A surging and indescribable power rose from Duque's chest. This power was different from any power that Duque had encountered before. Not only was it stronger, more refined, and purer, but it was also more independent. Could it be that this was a morning star? Not daring to touch Duque's bad luck, Khadgar hurriedly said, Master, this fellow's soul is here. If you're unhappy, you can just roast her soul to vent your anger. How about I let you kill the imprisoned demon for fun? Duke was amused by Khadgar's words. Bastard, do you think I'm such an unreasonable person? If I want to advance to the Morning Star realm, I can do so at any time. This situation isn't ideal, so I'm just suppressing myself. Khadgar patted his chest, looking as if he had been relieved of a huge burden. All right, let me see if this fellow has any information. Duque stretched out his hand, using arcane energy to suck up a third of Lady Deathspeaker's soul. Duque couldn't analyze the information within the soul, but the system elf could. By repeatedly reading the Eridar demon language floating in the shallow layer of the soul, Duque finally found what he wanted. He was suddenly ecstatic. Ha, ha, old Antonidas, you deserve to be beaten up by me. Ha. All of Karazhan reverberated with Duque's unbridled laughter. Chapter 292. The Dark Portal Year 2, 11th of February. In the Dalagen, Antonidas was feeling very angry. That's right, after he was cursed by Ghoul Dan last year, he was the first to study the power of curses. However, as more information on Orc Warlocks and Orc Death Knights was brought to the Dalagen, Antonidas suddenly realized that this was a taboo that humans should not touch. In the middle of last December, after an emergency discussion by the 6-member Kirin Tor Council, they voted 5-1 to seal all information on necromancy. They sealed everything and locked it in the Violet Library. They announced this decision to the entire Dalagen. The matter should have ended there, but in early January, Antonidas received a report that zombies were found in the frozen fields near the Dalagen. It was obvious that this was the work of a mage. Although the experimental subjects were just lab rats, these zombified animals caused the farmers around them to feel very uneasy. It also affected the reputation of the Dalagen mages. Antonidas ordered the mages to investigate this matter thoroughly, but to no avail. There could only be 2 reasons. 1. The person who did this was so clever that he could hide from the surveillance of the entire Dalagen and even the Kirin Tor Council. 2. This person was most likely a high-ranking mage in the Dalagen who used his power to hide everything. In his office, Antonidas glared at his secret agent. Necromancy must be banned. It was very simple. Although the Dalagen also had a school of necromancy, the mainstream values of human society rejected the existence of necromancy. Therefore, it was inevitable that the mages who were obsessed with necromancy were incompatible with the values of the Dalagen. Antonidas could not ignore the opinions of the majority for the sake of a single mage's experiment. At this time, the guard brought news of Duque's visit. Tell him that I'm busy. Previously, when Duque poached a large group of mages, he did receive a large number of unique magic books. However, they were all toy magic books with no practical value. There wasn't even a single valuable book that slipped through the net. There was a saying, when the water is too clear, there are no fish. Obviously, Duque had gone through a strict selection process. Antonidas looked like he had been tricked, and now Duque was here again. The guard showed an awkward expression. But Sir Marcus wants me to tell you that this is a matter of great importance to the Dalagen's 1,000-year reputation and survival. Antonidas was shocked. He had dealt with Duque before. Of course, he knew that Duque was not the kind of person who did not know what was important. If he could say such serious words, it could only prove that Duque really had something important to tell him in person. All of you, get out and let Duque in. Soon, only Antonidas was left in the room. Duque pushed the door open and entered. Marcus, your information better be as important as you say it is. Otherwise, I won't forgive you. Of course, if you are a friend of the Dalian will definitely not be stingy in returning the favor. This was Antonidas' little trap. If Duque asked for a return, then it was definitely not a big deal. It also proved that Duque was not sincere enough. Duque waved his hand. It doesn't matter what the return is. What matters is what I show you. Duque took out a soul imprisoned in a magic device. After quickly reading the information in the soul, Antonida's face suddenly changed. She didn't mention who it was. This may also be a false accusation. No, it just so happens that I know who he is. Duque took a deep breath. Sorry, in fact, I have a talent, the talent of detect evil. When I first saw Mediv, I found that there was a powerful demon possessing Mediv. At that time, I kept silent because I had no evidence, and even if I said it, no one would believe me. Antonidas was silent for a moment. He knew about the battle between Duque and Mediv. Why was it that so many people could not find out that Mediv was possessed, but Duque found out? This was a mystery that no one had solved. Now, Duque solemnly told him that everything he said was true. This gave Antonidas a bad feeling. In fact, before I came, I took the opportunity to visit some high-ranking Dalian mages, and I finally found my target. Antonidas' face was already frosty. Duke Marcus, do you know what you are saying? I know what I am saying. I want to invite the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsis Fail, here. He will provide evidence for my accusations. But before that, I strongly suggest that you contact the two counselors, Crasus and Kale. You are indeed powerful, but even you can't guarantee that you will be able to keep him here. All right. On the 12th of February, Kirin Tor Chairman Antonidas summoned all the Kirin Tor counselors and reserve counselors. For the upcoming war with the orcs, we need to meet again to discuss the arrangements. It was a very reasonable reason. No one suspected that there would be any problems. But when all the counselors arrived at the magic conference floating in the sky above the Dalian city, they suddenly realized that the situation was a little strange. For daily affairs, the 6-member council was the highest decision-maker. Unless it concerned the life or death of the Dalian, or a change in the council, there would not be any backup counselors. This time, the 3 backup counselors sat in the spectator seats. When everyone had arrived, the Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonsis, the Alliance's Deputy Commander Duque, and Paladin Uther arrived, filling the conference room with an ominous feeling. The magic circuits in Antonidas' body circulated, surging mana spilling out of his body. The temperature of the entire conference room dropped by a full 10 degrees. Chapter 293. In the Tirisful Council, whose purpose was to fight against the demons and prevent mages from casting spells excessively, all the counselors were selected from the Silver Moon Council and the Kirin Tor Council. It could be said that these two councils were the vanguard of fighting against evil and the stronghold of justice. Now, Antonidas publicly announced that someone in the Kirin Tor Council was colluding with the demons. Everyone's first reaction was that it was impossible. The next second, everyone's reaction was, this could really be true. If it wasn't to fight against the demons, why would they invite the Archbishop of Holy Light and the leader of the Paladins? Enough. Let the facts speak for themselves. Antonidas' angry beard calmed down a little, and he turned to look at the Archbishop of Holy Light. Archbishop Fail, please. Fail didn't refuse. Destroying evil is one of my lifelong wishes. Under Uther's protection, he walked to the center of the council hall and put his hands together. Suddenly, a dazzling holy star rose from the Archbishop's hands, and the holy light spread across the entire council hall. However, 1 second passed, 2 seconds passed, 10 seconds passed, and nothing happened. There were no screams of the demons, no leakage of evil energy, nothing at all. Archbishop Alonsos and Uther were a little stunned. They had been informed by Duque and Antonidas, and that was why they specially came here to subdue the demons. Now, there was nothing at all? A drop of cold sweat dripped from Antonidas' forehead, and he couldn't help but look at Duque. It was because of Duque's exposure of Sargeras possessing the Mediv that Antonidas had almost unconditional trust in Duque. Now that there was a demon but they couldn't find it, wasn't this a great embarrassment? Of course, Duque deserved to die, but his authority as the chairman would also be greatly weakened. For a moment, Antonidas' relationship with Duque almost changed from trust to hatred. At this time, Duque slowly stood up and said in a calm voice, "There is no doubt that the demons are among us. I just want to tell everyone that times are advancing, and so are our old enemies, the demons. 10,000 years ago, would anyone have thought that the demon king would stoop to possess a human guardian?" Everyone's body shook simultaneously. Indeed, everyone was a little unhappy that Mediv had tricked the entire human race. Duque's words made everyone even more vigilant. Duque spoke again, "Curse. An entirely new form of evil. The Undying." It was a non-living form that he had never seen before. The appearance of these two things is exactly what we need to be wary of. Therefore, when traditional demonic techniques are no longer effective, Archbishop Fao, please research new detection methods. Even though Duque had yet to prove that he was wrong, the meticulous Fao, who never lacked a sense of justice, nodded in agreement. In the human heart, there is rarely absolute justice or absolute evil. Therefore, the demons used this to deceive the detection of the holy light and achieve the purpose of infiltrating humans to continue spreading evil and undying beliefs. Actually, Archbishop, all you have to do is add the holy light into the spiritual attack. Fao understood immediately. With a flip of his palm, waves of holy light once again spread throughout the entire hall. This time, one of the counselors finally bent over in pain. Ah! The skin on Thuzad's poker face cracked inch by inch, revealing the pale, lifeless skin underneath. Even though Antonidas already knew the answer from Duque, he was still shocked speechless when he saw it with his own eyes. Beside Thuzad, Prince Kale, and Crasus, who were already prepared, instantly opened up their defensive shields. One on the left and one on the right, they attacked together and blasted out more than 100 fireballs, shattering Thuzad's magic shield into pieces. At the same time, Wather also attacked. The strongest paladin in history raised his hand and cast Divine Sanction. This broke through Thuzad's magic defense and directly hit his evil soul. The world spun around him. Thuzad didn't even have time to summon his evil creatures before he was struck in the face by Wather the Fierce. Like a high-flying ball in a baseball, Thuzad's body flew up under the bombardment of the divine hammer. Unfortunately, he didn't fly very far. His body only rose about a meter high before he was bounced back by an ice wall behind him. That was Antonidas' attack. He was caught off guard and was completely caught off guard. In addition, Antonidas' strength was not inferior to his at all. In fact, his strength was far above his. In the future, the Great Frost Lich, one of the strongest fighters under the Lich King, Thuzad, was now like a little girl being molested by a few strong men. He had no strength to fight back. He was stepped on by Wather, his hammer pressed against his head, and his body was continuously sealed by Crasus and Kale. At this moment, Thuzad was no different from the most useless skeleton soldier. He also knew that he was definitely finished, so he let go of everything. Why? How did you know, Duke Marcus, that I gave up my life to pursue eternity? I only transformed myself into a lich last week. Even that female demon didn't know that I did it. She thought that I was just a degenerate with a soul. But tell me, why? Duque gently pointed at his own eyes. Just like how I saw through Sargeras' possession of Mediv, I also saw through you. I have a pair of eyes that can see through the souls of degenerates who have been corrupted by demons. When the dust settled, Antonidas also walked forward. I've always thought highly of your talent. If not, I wouldn't have agreed to let you become one of the Kirin Tor counselors. Chapter 294. Thuzad, a malignant tumor lurking in the human camp. Duque had long wanted to deal with him, but he didn't have any evidence. He was one of the 6 counselors of Kirin Tor. Just this identity alone was enough to make him immune to death. To be at Kel Thuzad's level, he was like Anduin or Bolvar in Stormwind. If he were to be killed casually, it would be strange if the Dalajan did not explode. If the Dalajan went berserk, the Alliance could forget about having a team of mages. With reason and evidence, they had to dig a big hole to bury such a powerful person in advance. Actually, when he saw the Dead Speaker's soul diary, Duque didn't react on the spot. "I'm very lucky. I've finally found a fallen with great power and potential among the advanced mages of Dalaran. He is extremely obsessed with psychics and has no resistance to my lord's power." In the future, there were too many liches or fallen who were skilled in the art of necromancy and had a name. Ras Frost Whisper, Dean of Psychics, and this Dead Speaker in front of him. However, these guys all had one thing in common, and that was they were all followers of the Cursing Sect. Speaking of the Cursing Sect, one had to mention one existence, Kel Thuzad. As a veteran player who had led teams to defeat countless times in the game, and finally conquered Kel Thuzad's nest, Naxxramas, Duque definitely knew that the boss of the Cursing Sect was Kel Thuzad. In history, it wasn't until the end of the Second Beastman War that Kel Thuzad's conflict with his colleagues continued to expand due to their obsession with necromancy. After hearing the Lich King's summons, he sold all his assets and ran to the polar continent's Northrend to lick the Lich King's boots, becoming a powerful lich that made everyone tremble in fear. At that time, he founded the Cursing Sect. However, the plots of demons were long-term and sinister. As the leader of the Burning Legion, Sargeras could secretly sneak in and hide in Egwin's stomach for more than 300 years. Duque didn't believe that the Cursing Sect didn't have any predecessors, and that there weren't any people who had been hiding for a long time. Needless to ask, there must be. Otherwise, how could the Lich King's arrival in the world of Azeroth be so terrifying? Without so many liches and death knights, how could Arthas control so many brainless ghouls and skeletons? So after seeing Lady Deadspeaker's memories, Duque tried to visit a group of Kirin Tor counselors. Of course, his target was only Kel Thuzad. Just like the system notification, Sargeras had possessed Medivh. This time, Duque could clearly see the label of this President Ku in the system's vision, Lich. Duque had a hard time holding it in. He almost burst out laughing on the spot. At that time, he was accompanied by the Azure Dragon on the left and the White Tiger on the right. Yes, the two Holy Knights, Gavin Rad and Windsor. Even if Manager Ku were to fly into a rage on the spot, Duque was not afraid at all. If President Ku wanted to run, Duque wouldn't be able to stop him either. Of course, President Ku wouldn't fly into a rage. It would be ideal for Old Man Antonidas to deal with him. As for Kel Thuzad, who hadn't been summoned by the Lich King, he seemed to be his obedient pet. In the end, he was a lich, but he pretended to be a human. Naturally, he would be struck by lightning. After a whole day, Antonidas called Duque into his office. Kel Thuzad has been purified. It was supervised by Knight Uther and carried out by Archbishop Fail. After Antonidas finished, Duque nodded. This kind of thing couldn't be deceived. He could ask Uther or Alonso's later. The only problem is that, in the books and legends, liches have phylacteries. We didn't find Kel Thuzad's phylactery. But that's not important. Because of our arrangements, he lost at least 90% of his soul. A lich with such a heavy loss of soul, even if he were to be resurrected in the future, he wouldn't amount to much. At most, he would be trash at the level of a sky mage. Hearing this, Duque finally let out a sigh of relief. That was Chief Ku. He was despicable, shameless, and lowly. He did all sorts of dirty things. If he was still the original Chief Ku, Duque would really have to worry about the people around him. Since Chief Ku was destined to become trash, Duque didn't mind teaching him how to be a human. Antonidas pinched his white eyebrows. All right, the principle of a mage is equivalent exchange. Even though I don't like your style, you have made outstanding contributions to the Dalajan. The Dalajan will not mistreat you. How could I accept that? Duque said hypocritically. All right, thank you, Deputy Commander Duke Marcus. Thank you for your outstanding contributions to the Alliance. You can go now. Even though he knew that Antonidas was joking, Duque still released a fierce gaze that was comparable to death gaze. "How dare you?" That was what Duque's gaze said. "Why don't you come to Kirin Tor and be one of the 6 counselors? There's an empty spot." Duque rolled his eyes. "I'm not going to your place to suffer." Antonidas was amused. He had an expression that said, "Little guy, I've seen through you." "All right, I also guess that you want my arcane circuit model." Duque corrected him. "To be precise, I want an enhanced arcane circuit that can support Crown of Ice and another fire magic circuit of the same level." As soon as Duque finished speaking, Antonidas' eyelids twitched. "You have a big appetite." If it wasn't for the fact that Antonidas thought that he owed Duque a huge favor, he would have flipped the table on the spot. He wouldn't have known that Thuzad had never thought of directly causing trouble in the Dalajan. In the end, the Kirin Tor speaker pinched his nose and admitted it. "All right, it's the Phoenix Flame of the Sunstrider family, right? I've also done some research on their circuits. It's not impossible for me to give you the arcane circuit that I've researched. First, I have to tell you that this is an unverified magic circuit model. I'm not responsible for what happens in the future." Duque nodded. "All right. Secondly, from Morningstar onwards, every time the Crown of Ice circuit is upgraded, you need a special sacrifice to strengthen your circuit. This is something that cannot be obtained through training. I used the soul of a Yeti King to upgrade to Radiant Moon, and to upgrade to Sunrise, I used the soul of a Blue Dragon King." At this point, Antonidas returned the death gaze. Yes, it was the kind of death gaze that would kill you if you dared to say it out loud. Chapter 295. After all, the Blue Dragons were on the verge of extinction, and if the Blue Dragon King found out, Antonidas would definitely be in huge trouble. Duque nodded seriously before he continued. "It's not impossible for you to fuse Phoenix Flames and Crown of Ice, these 2 top-level circuits, but it means that you're taking a path that's 100 times more difficult than mine. Not only do you need the 4 types of souls, ice and fire, but you also need to strengthen your arcane circuit, which means that you need 6 rare souls to ascend to Breaking Dawn." Duque curled his lips and didn't say anything. He was still holding the tip of an artifact magic staff, Itish, the legendary staff of the Guardian, in his hand. If he was still that black in this life, he would have to collect 41 fragments of the artifact magic staff. Compared to this kind of unreliable collection, elemental souls with a clear direction and even substitutes were nothing. Of course, Duque was still a little envious of Medivh. Medivh, who became a demigod mage and triple virtue pharaoh almost effortlessly, clearly had a good mother. Who was Egwin? The former world guardian, the awesome person who fought alongside the 4-colored dragons and abused demons all day long. Antonidas had to tremble in fear when dealing with a Blue Dragon King, but if it was Egwin, a big shot would speak up with just one word. The Blue Dragon King would probably sacrifice his soul even if he committed suicide. Speaking of which, whether he liked it or not was another matter. Seeing Duque's unmoved appearance, Antonidas even had the illusion that he was old. These were 2 different things. This time, Duque had helped him clean up his own faction and saved Dalaran from losing a huge amount of reputation. He still had to repay this favor. Antonidas continued, "Perhaps your path is the broadest. Since you've chosen, I won't say anything. However, the magic circuit I pass on to you is still easy for outsiders to see. You have to pretend." Duque understood on the spot. Oh, I'll deliver 10,000 top-level magic books to the Dalajan." Antonidas rolled his eyes. "What the F***CK? Top class?" It was obvious that he was using those inferior magic books to fool people again. The old speaker was a little angry. "Don't go too far." "All right, 100 Morningstar books and 10 Radiant Moon books," Duque added. "Announce to the public that there are 1,000 Morningstar and 100 Radiant Moon magic tomes among the 10,000. Just like that, the old fox and the young fox reached an agreement. "Okay, I'll give you this arcane light magic circuit model." When Antonidas transmitted the magic model to Duque, Duque wasn't surprised by the magic model's wonders. "Congratulations, host. Antonidas is willing to give you the top-notch arcane magic circuit, Arcane Throne, with a completion rate of 82%. It represented the higher energy level of Antonidas' laboratory. There was also the Dalagan sky, which was slightly thinner in energy compared to them. The boundless sky, the vast land, everything paled in comparison to the bright star that was Duque. Duque gently closed his eyes. Every breath he took caused his body to undergo a miraculous change. The hot air that surged into his lungs was instantly absorbed by the small alveoli in his lungs. All the oxygen entered his blood vessels and was quickly transported to the magic circuit that existed in his body in the form of the second dimension. It became nourishment, stimulating the magic in the circuit to rapidly fission. It provided all the magic that Duque needed to cast spells. Duque suddenly laughed bitterly. No wonder Sky Magi and Morning Star Magi were a very, very important dividing line in the world of Magi. This was in no way inferior to the advancement of ordinary Magi. Previously, Earth and Sky Magi were said to have transported energy from the outside world to meet the needs of casting spells. Then above Morning Star, it was a classic mix of magic. It could be absorbed from the outside world or created by oneself. From a transmigrator's point of view, before Morning Star, it was a conventional aircraft carrier that needed a lot of fuel to operate. After Morning Star, it would be upgraded to a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Even though many things were needed, there was no need to worry about energy. Chapter 296. In a sense, Duque was now carrying a nuclear reactor for human use. No matter what, Duque had taken a very important step in the field of magic. The moment Duque advanced, the entire Dalagan was in an uproar. Who's advancing? This mana is ridiculous. Which Morning Star Master has finally stepped onto the path of Radiant Moon? The cries of the acolytes and low-ranked wizards were unreliable. The high-ranked wizards did not look too good. Many high-ranked wizards had experienced the process of transforming ordinary elemental power into pure Morning Star mana. This was definitely the first time the amount of mana was so ridiculous. Comparable to Grandmaster Antonidas? No. It's even more ridiculous than the chairman. Perhaps only the legendary protector, Medivh, would have such a terrifying momentum when he advanced. Yes, back then I was studying in the Elven Forest, and I actually felt an explosion of mana from Karazhan that was more than 100 kilometers away. That momentum was similar to this person right now. My God, this is at least the mana of 100 ordinary Morning Star wizards, right? Who's it? Feeling the arcane energy storm that was spilling out of his body gradually stop and the surging mana circulating normally in his body, Duque really wanted to laugh wildly for a minute. The system notifications kept appearing. As you have obtained the top-notch arcane magic circuit, Arcane Throne, you have obtained all strengthened arcane metamagic specialties by default. You have obtained the metamagic specialization, Arcane Concentration. The chances of enemies resisting your arcane magic are reduced by 30%. You have obtained the metamagic specialization, Arcane Focus. When you cast any spell, there is a 33% chance that you will enter a spell-saving state. In this state, the mana consumption of your next damaging spell will be reduced by 100%. You have obtained the top-notch metamagic specialization, Arcane Energy Storm. After activation, your spell damage will be increased by 100% and your mana consumption will be increased by 50%. Lasts for 30 seconds. After each use, you have to wait for 5 minutes for your arcane magic circuit to calm down, or else there is a possibility of the circuit collapsing. As you have obtained the top-level Frost Magic Circuit, Crown of Ice, you have obtained all enhanced Frost metamagic abilities by default. You have obtained the metamagic ability, Rapid Cooldown. You have obtained the metamagic ability, Ice Barrier. Of course, there was also the fire metamagic ability that Phoenix Flames gave him. The metamagic specialties of all three schools almost dazzled Duque. Now that Medivh had passed away and Khadgar had become a ghost, Duque could say without any exaggeration that he was the only high-ranked triple cultivator pharaoh in the world. With a thought, 3 magic orbs of each element appeared behind Duque. There were 3 magic orbs of each element. A crimson ball of fire, a pure white ball of ice, and a purplish-blue ball of arcane magic. All 3 types of balls were moving in a triangular pattern on Duque's back. There were exactly 9 balls occupying a 360-degree position around Duque, and each ball was 40 degrees. Outside the state guest house, all 5 members of the Kirin Tor Council had arrived, including Archbishop Fail and Uther. Everyone applauded in unison. "Congratulations, Duque." Antonida's smile was a little forced. "You really are a genius." Crassus congratulated him sincerely. "Congratulations, but, Duque, are you really not targeting me?" Kale, that's smile was a little strange because there were 3 yellow-green arcane flames circling above his head. This was already Kale, that's trademark. Now that Kale, that's had 3 and Duque had 9, it was a little embarrassing no matter how one looked at it. No, Kale, that's, you should be my master in this aspect. I found that you can better train your ability to manipulate the elements by doing this. So please don't be offended, I couldn't help but learn it. In the future, I'll tell everyone I meet that I learned from you, okay? Duque very sincerely used the special skill, hypocrisy, to cover up his actions that were purely pretentious. All of a sudden even Kale, that was moved. No, I'm too ashamed to say that. Speaking of which, I'm a little biased. Kale, that's frowned, and in the next moment, 3 arcane energy balls appeared behind him. However, these 3 energy balls looked weaker than his fire elemental balls. Duque blinked. Kale, that seemed a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry, it seems that I've neglected the cultivation of the arcane. The training of the arcane circuit can indeed make my flame circuit stronger. You've woken me up." At this moment, Jaina arrived. "Congratulations, Brother Duque." Jaina's words were very sweet. "Thank you." Duque smiled slightly. No matter where one was, a beautiful woman was always a beautiful scenery. This time, the moment she saw the 9 energy balls behind Duque, Jaina could no longer look away. Because she saw an existence that broke her common sense and saw an even more powerful possibility. For some reason, looking at Duque, who had successfully cultivated 3 paths of cultivation, she felt her heart palpitate. It was not that she had fallen in love with Duque, but that she had fallen in love with the power of the 3 paths of cultivation. However, Jaina kept this desire in the bottom of her heart, because she knew very well that it was not easy to obtain the magic circuit model of these 3 paths of cultivation. Getting the details of the fine-tuning circuit was a secret of all mages. Originally, in her imagination, Antonida's was already the strongest in her heart, and the only ultimate existence that was qualified for her to become his disciple. Now, her thoughts were a little shaken. Antonida's walked over and patted Duque's shoulder. "In any case, congratulations, Duque. You can now proudly hold the title of master. However, because of your advancement, you neglected the mages you took with you. If they come to apply for contract arbitration, I won't help you." What he meant was, "Kid, have you reaped enough benefits? If you've reaped enough benefits, get lost. Don't be an eyesore here." Duque smiled bitterly. He quickly bid farewell to the Dalajan people and rushed back to South Shore. Duque was busy with his advancement and had not been seen for 2 whole months. Not only that, but because Duque was not around, everyone could not open the teleportation portal to Karazhan. This caused the mages who came because of his reputation to complain a lot. The bitter Ilusia had no choice but to comfort everyone as Duque's assistant, promising that when Duque returned, all sorts of benefits and lessons would be made up for. If Duque did not have the title of Deputy Commander of the Alliance, there would have been many mages who would have complained to Antonidas that Duque had not fulfilled his end of the contract and would apply to cancel it. All the grumbles disappeared without a trace as Duque appeared in front of everyone with the halo of a morning star wizard and 9 energy balls hovering behind him. Chapter 297. What kind of joke was this? A 16-year-old morning star wizard? Just the abundant and terrifying undulations alone were enough to kill most morning star wizards in an instant. Duque was only a first-rank morning star wizard. That was not to mention that Duque was a super pharaoh who specialized in fire, ice, and arcane magic. Only an idiot would not cling to such an exaggerated golden thigh. The few fellows who had been the most rowdy ran to Alicia, begging for the forgiveness of the noble lady of the Bara family. As long as she did not tell on them, everything would be fine. No matter how good-tempered Alicia was, she was not a pushover. She bore the resentful gazes of those fellows and truthfully told Duque everything that had happened in the past 2 months. Duque used his Mediva's moral integrity to activate hypocrisy and said, "Oh, it's all right. This is human nature. It's my fault. My mistake has delayed everyone's studies. I will try my best to make it up to everyone. If everyone feels that it is unreasonable, I am willing to cancel the contract. Don't worry, there will be sufficient compensation." Of course, it was a different matter in his heart. "You dare look down on me for causing trouble? Don't leave if you dare. I promise to send you to the safest place on the battlefield." Those fellows were just saying it with their mouths. They did not leave before and they would not leave now. If they had no confidence in Duque, they would not have chosen to come. Those who came were poor acolytes or beginner wizards who did not have enough funds. As the saying goes, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. As long as the towering tree that was Duque did not fall, no one would be able to cause any trouble. Moreover, Duque had not fallen, but had become even more imposing and exaggerated. After Duque gave a few lectures and privately guided a few official wizards, all their resentment disappeared. With the arrival of spring, the Great War was about to begin. The orcs who had been dormant for an entire winter did not weaken their fighting spirit. On the contrary, their fighting spirit was even more vigorous. Glory and land were what the tribes desired. The orcs were never satisfied with these two things. After receiving reports from the spies and the dwarves from Ironforge, the entire alliance went into a state of alert. That was because the beast men who were migrating south during the winter were gradually moving towards the wetlands. The orc laborers who had not left during the winter had begun to build ships again. In the capital of the Rotterdam Kingdom, Lothar presided over the first high-level meeting of the Alliance of Darkness in 2 years. The number of participants was very high, and the kings of the various kingdoms were all present. Taking advantage of the fact that the orcs' ships had not sealed off the sea, the dwarf prince Magni Bronzebeard once again came to the Rotterdam Kingdom. Thanks to the reduced activity of the beastmen during the winter, Duque used his own fleet to transport many batches of supplies to the Iron Furnace Castle. The bronze-bearded dwarves of Iron Furnace Castle had a much better life. The dwarves' underground warfare wasn't something that the other tall races could handle, so there was no point in sending reinforcements. Duque's act of tightening his belt and providing medicine and food warmed the dwarves' hearts even more. So when he came to Magni Lordaeron and saw Duque, he used the most direct way to express his enthusiasm. He used his dwarven strength to bend Duque's waist, and gave Duque a bear hug. "Magni, that's enough. I can't breathe." Duque rolled his eyes, almost foaming at the mouth. "Ha, thank you. You really are the dwarves' best friend. I can't wait for the day you lead the army to counterattack the orcs. If we're lucky, we can counterattack this year. But this depends on whether the heavens are looking out for us," Duque consoled. Magni automatically filtered out the rest. "All right, I'll tell them to hold on for another half a year." "What the hell I said is," Magni blinked and showed a cunning side. "My people are in the most difficult situation. They need hope. If that doesn't work, you can send a few thousand soldiers to Iron Furnace Castle next winter. They'll still be there." "What the F***CK, this works? You're really a dwarf. Are you sure you're not a goblin in dwarf skin?" Duque wanted to roll his eyes this time. In return for the Alliance's support for Iron Furnace Castle, Magni and Duque's fleet brought a large batch of long warhammers and axes forged by the dwarves in winter. There was no choice. Dwarves just didn't like to use swords. Rather than having dwarven craftsmen forge long swords, it was better to make what they were best at. Dwarven two-handed warhammers and axes were one-handed versions for humans anyway. If they were made longer and slightly balanced, they would be the best weapons in the human world. That was a total of 30,000 dwarven weapons. All the kings were jealous of the dwarves' man-made weapons, but Magni was stubborn and didn't buy it. The food and medicine were split evenly between Duque, so he only gave it to Duque. Duque had the final say on how it was divided. Dooku was also very generous. He would not take it all for himself. After wrangling with the other kings, regardless of the country's strength, the principle was that whoever contributed the most troops, money, and manpower would get the biggest share. Naturally, King Tyrrhena's received the biggest piece of cake. Magrani and General Abendis's Blood Cross Army's elite team had all changed their equipment, and everyone else was envious of them. After the rare benefit, the military conference hall became like a market again because of the orcs' movements. We must also build a line of defense on the South Stream coast. We want your cement, a lot of it. It wasn't the first time Duque had seen long legs hanging down from that position, but why were there four? Could it be that if he planted a pair of legs in winter, he would be able to harvest 2 pairs in spring? Pooh pooh pooh. What kind of damned setting was this? Whoosh. Storm warning. Storm warning. In 10 seconds, there will be an updraft and a lot of clothes may be blown away. Duque pinched his nose and imitated the clumsiest mechanical voice. Illyria, on the other hand, was the most thin-skinned of them all. She did a beautiful pigeon flip and jumped down. Queen Sylvie, on the other hand, giggled and swung her white legs without a care in the world. Hee, sis, don't believe him. If he really dares to do that, we'll just shoot down all his magic energy balls like apples. Duque rubbed his forehead. The competitive Queen Sylvie might really do that. Alright, I think I know why the boring Windrunner ladies are here. Duque withdrew his gaze. We've been moldy here for an entire winter for the Alliance. Aurelia put her hands on her waist and said confidently. Duque waved his hand and immediately used Magician's hand to bring a stack of letters of complaint. Yes. Before the winter festival, the goat that George's family used to celebrate disappeared. Later, it was found in the Windrunner's camp. The 2 legs on her head forgot to swing. My Naga told me that a nimble thief stole a dozen of my merfolk's golden pearls. A gust of wind blew. Why is the spring wind still a little cold? 2 barrels of dwarven gold wine that King Lang used to celebrate the new year and sent by Bronzebeard King of Ironforge mysteriously disappeared. Aurelia looked at the back of a certain future queen who was turning around and trying to escape. At this moment, a gust of wind blew on Duque's roof, and the 2 sisters disappeared. Servanas, the angry voice of a big sister came from the wind. Duque scratched his head. As expected of a Windrunner, she can go wherever she wants. Of course, Duque didn't really want to settle the score with Servanas. He just wanted to tease her a little. Of course, after the incident with Kuel Salis, Aurelia, who had always been noble in front of others as a high elf, obviously couldn't tolerate her sister's behavior. A few minutes later, Aurelia brought back the pitiful Queen Sylvanas. With her ears pulled and tears hanging from the corners of her eyes, Sylvanas bowed with her head lowered was unexpectedly cute. Duke almost wanted to go over and kiss Queen Sheila. Well, Duque, I'll compensate for the loss on behalf of my sister. For a moment, Duque really wanted to ask Sylvanas to sell herself. That was Servanas they were talking about. The unbelievably powerful Sylvanas. Even if she didn't become a Dark Ranger, she was still unbelievably powerful. But that was impossible. First of all, it couldn't pass Duque's own heart. Chapter 299. Magic was a magical thing. It had an extremely unscientific side, but it also had a fixed pattern that showed its supernatural side. When Duque combined the 3 elements of fire, frost, and arcane magic into an energy ball, Lothar looked at Duque as if he was looking at a walking bomb. After being repeatedly hit by Lang's King's contempt, Duque gave up on healing. It was March, a day of spring. It was also the 3-month anniversary of Duque losing his little maid. It was because Duque had left Vanessa in South Shore after going to Karazhan. Then, Vanessa, who felt that she could not be of much help, went to train in a sacred place for thieves. Yes, it was the Ravenholt Manor in the northeast of the Hillsbrad Hills. Although the little maid left a note saying that she was training somewhere in the area, Duque immediately thought of that place. Logically speaking, recruiting a team of spies was also quite useful. Unfortunately, it was really useless in the following period of time. Since Duque was busy, he did not bother about it for the time being. In March, the Horde would make a big move. Van Cleve and Stroman, who had spent the entire autumn and winter in the western wilderness, sent a letter asking when they would take action. Duque's instructions were, wait for the main force of the Horde to leave the southern continent first. The main force of the Horde could not stay in the southern continent for long. If it were a human king, he might be satisfied with occupying such a vast piece of land, but unfortunately, it was the Horde, and the aggressiveness of the orcs would not let them stay put. After the midwinter ended, the troops that fought in South Shore last year gathered in South Shore again. However, Lothar flew into a rage and rushed to Rotterdam to vent his anger on King Tyrrhenus again. The reason was simple. At such a time, Rotterdam, Dalagen, and Alterac actually refused to enter a state of total war. What do you mean by this? Do you really think that you can destroy millions of orcs with just these few people? Even if we ignore the laborers who do not have much combat power, and even if the elites of the Horde are decreasing, the total number of troops of the Horde is still close to 500,000. Lothar slammed the table hard. Facing Lothar's anger, Menethil too was also helpless. I've already sent out my warning. Most of my lords, however, chose to use money to fulfill their obligations. So, if you want money I can, but if you want soldiers I can't give you more. Sorry, Commander Lothar. This was the weirdness of the feudal knight system. The people were the private property of the lord, and the lord listened to the king. However, the king had no right to directly conscript the lord's people without a proper reason. Now, I can't wait for the orcs to take 100 goblin airships and descend into your Alterac palace, holding a human barbecue party in your palace courtyard. With that, Delin kicked open the meeting hall's door and left without looking back, leaving Eden roaring in exasperation with a face as red as a pig's liver. On this day, the kings of Stormwind and the other 3 countries, who had already entered a state of total war, parted on bad terms with the leaders of the 3 countries who were only willing to enter a state of partial war. If not for the incident on the 15th of March, this might have been a precursor to the split of the alliance. On this day, the 3rd Fleet of Kurtiras patrolled the waters opposite the Paladin Gulf. The lookout suddenly saw something unusual. On the horizon, countless blood-red sails suddenly appeared. The lookout sounded the alarm. Dang dang dang. The shrill alarm alarmed the entire fleet. What the hell? Why are the blood sail pirates here? The commander of the 3rd Fleet, Major General Akent, cursed angrily. However, something else he saw through the telescope made him shudder. Ships. More than a dozen huge warships. They were definitely battleship-class ships, but they had a completely different shape from human ships. Apart from the sails, the entire ship had no sense of beauty. It was like a pile of garbage floating on the sea, piled up by countless messy wooden products. However, the cannons on the warships clearly told the Major General that they were all F***King warships. And they were orc warships. Commander, please give your orders. The first mate shouted anxiously. The other ships also sent flags of inquiry. Who has the navy of Kurtiras ever been afraid of on the sea? Raise the battle flag. A day later, the entire alliance learned of the destruction of the 3rd Fleet of Kurtiras. All the countries were shocked. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.